Hey everyone, what's going on? My name's Joe, and I'm half of the host here at How Many Fingers, and this is a minute or two long pre-roll that I do every week to catch everyone up with the whereabouts of our podcast. I do want today to be a quick one, just because I want to get right into Solo. Believe me, we have a lot to say, but we do have some big stuff to announce this week. Big stuff like our upcoming show at Philadelphia Podcast Festival. We let it slip on one of these episodes, and I just wanted to address it up front here. Again, I'm not really sure if we're supposed to be announcing it yet, but fuck it. We're going to be at FIT this year, the Philadelphia Improv Theater in Philadelphia, obviously, on Sunday, June 24th at 4 p.m. Also, at the Philadelphia Podcast Festival, I will be making an appearance on our friend and former guest, Ross Wiseman's live podcast taping for the podcast Kid Flicks. And that's on Saturday, June 30th at 1 p.m. at the bar Tattooed Mom in, again, Philadelphia, PA. But yeah, we'll keep you guys up to date with both of those live shows. Check out our episode next week. We'll be reviewing Action Point. But let's just get right into it. We're reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story, with special guest Eric Dryburgh this week. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week we'll be reviewing Solo, a Star Wars story.
Hey Joe, how low are the box office numbers for this movie?
Well, Mike, they're so low. Hey everyone, and welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting snockered and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And thank you to George Weston, my first cousin once removed, and I definitely didn't have to look up what the proper title is.
Did you look on your family tree?
I texted my mom and I was like, I know I'm related to George. I know he's your cousin, but what does that make him to me? So it's first cousin once removed, according to Google.
Okay.
So thanks for that, George, on Facebook.
And after I got my sample back from 23andMe, I found out that George Weston is in fact my first cousin removed. Thank you, George.
But yeah, if you have any further synonyms, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, email, Gmail, anywhere online. We'd love to hear from you and get some of your synonyms in the pile to be read later. But let us delay no further. Betwixt us, finally, we've got him on the podcast. Woo! Eric Dryburgh, everybody.
Hey guys.
He's here.
I made
What's going on?
All right, so Eric is in a lot of projects. He's a very busy man, and I'm going to let him list off some of the bands that he's in currently. He's a very talented drummer.
What would you like to promote at this time?
Oh boy, I don't know. I play in a bunch of bands in New York City. I live in Brooklyn.
What's your address?
I play snare drum in a brass band called the Funk Crust Brass Band.
Funk Crust Brass Band.
Yeah, we're like a disco punk brass band that sings about the apocalypse.
Nice.
Pretty sweet.
That is really cool.
I'm also in a radical, like a political radical marching band called the Rude Mechanical Orchestra. I've been playing with them for a long time. I'm in an indie rock band called Ordinary Things. I still play a couple shows with my friends in Boy Things. That's my New Jersey-based indie rock band.
Lots of things.
Lots of things going on.
Boy Things and Ordinary Things.
And every now and then I'll sit in with my friends that play in a folk punk band called Out of System Transfer.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm busy playing a lot of
Very
drums.
busy.
Yeah, really. That's a lot. But I mean, I feel like even before this, we should have explained our background with Eric.
He's been discussed on the podcast before.
We've referenced Eric before because we all met in our first year of college, and Eric was the not even movie plug, but just all things entertainment plug. If you needed a movie, Eric would come through with it. I don't know if I should mention how. I mean, I guess we've all done it, but, but
we may be surveilled by the FBI right now.
On the Wi-Fi list, there's
an
currently an
FBI surveillance van.
Yeah, I had a large collection, lots of external hard drives full of movies. I think
He had terabytes. He was ready to. He had the entire. You had the entire.
You used to give us whole TV series.
Yes.
Like you gave me Dinosaurs at one point, the TV series.
But it was more going to Eric was more inclusive than going to our university library for something.
Yeah.
Like kind of. There was something ridiculous that you had.
We
Where
used
it was
to,
like
I
a
remember
fucking,
like putting in requests too, being like, Eric, you're going home this weekend. I could use these 3 movies.
Well, there was a point where like he stopped getting like individual movies or entire television series, and he started downloading like, every movie from the early 1900s like playlist, like kind of like just like Eric wanted to see his list grow. But no, a lot of really great. Eric showed us a lot of really great film, and yeah, I feel like we created like a lot of. I don't know. There was something. There was an awakening with film in college, and
Yeah, I remember one of the
Eric without
first-
studying film had a large part to do with that.
One of the first years that I ever watched like every Oscar nominee for Best Picture
Mm-hmm.
was the year that The Wrestler and Slumdog Millionaire won that year, and I remember you getting a lot of those films for us
Mm-hmm.
to all watch that year. So you were a big part of our like interest in Oscars
I have
budding
a
and
whole
developing.
folder of just Oscar-nominated movies.
Yeah.
For like multiple years.
Do you still have the collection or?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's there.
And
Blew some dust off.
we were talking about this the other day when we saw each other at the Memorial Day thing, but I felt like we were doing kind of movie memes before movie memes were a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where like to be relevant, Eric, what is it? Still exists that player that's like the orange traffic cone.
VLC.
Oh,
Yeah, VLC, and Eric would, and again, this is
My loop tracks?
Yes, Eric would create loop tracks, which sounds dumb now if you're in college. Like, yeah, everyone does that, but this is like 2007, 2008 or whatever. And Eric has his like laptop wired into our TV, and he's just like looping from like the episode 3, like, you underestimate my power! You underestimate my power! And like, it was just really, it was to be annoying, but it was funny, and it was, I feel like, again, we were kind of ahead of our time of like a looping kind of joke.
For ourselves only.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Speaking of episode 3.
Yes. 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 But yeah.
All that to say that it's very appropriate that Eric is here reviewing Solo with us. We're very glad to have you, Eric. Thanks for coming on.
Wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for coming.
I'm very glad to be here.
All right, so we are drinking this week, as we do every week. We're drinking Hazy Little Thing IPA from Sierra Nevada.
What's this going to be about?
This bad boy open. I went to a new liquor store this week that opened on my way home. They had a very limited beer selection, so this is one of like 6 craft quote-unquote beers that were there.
It's good. It's just like, it's not super hoppy, strong IPA. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
What is the other Sierra Nevada? They do Celebration Ale, right? I think that's Sierra Nevada.
And what's the green one?
Pale ale.
Yeah, I think it's just Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is like their main thing.
They do one that I think it's like Celebration IPA or Celebration Ale that I really like. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is fine. It's carbonated.
Yeah,
it's like
it's-
much more carbonated feeling than.
Honestly,
beer.
I kind of thought it was going to be like a stronger, kind of hoppier taste, and it's kind of just, it kind of almost tastes like somebody poured some like hops into like a Budweiser, which we're also drinking.
Yeah.
Kind of like this can too. It's just like 3 colors, 3 tones. It's a little less busy than some of the other cans that are out there. It's not quite minimalist, but it's better than some of the others that we got going on. So anyway, sponsor us here in Nevada.
Yeah. You taste like a Budweiser that somebody fucking pissed some hops into. But send us a few cans. We'll give you a
Your
shout
cans
out.
are okay and the beer is meh. Sponsor us.
But we've got all that to cover. Mike,
Yes.
do you want to read me that IMDb description, and then I'll go over some pretty quick notes just so we can get into this movie.
Sure thing. During an adventure into the criminal underworld, Han Solo. Do you know that's his last name?
I wonder
Wonder how he got that last
What
name.
is the origin of that?
That question that's just been at the the back of our minds ever since we met Han Solo.
What's the origin of Han Solo's belt? Gee, I wish there was a fucking movie that would tell me.
Where did he get those dice?
I'm wishing...
that we could barely see in the original trilogy.
Those dice should have an IMDb credit. They had 30 minutes of screen time. They're fucking ridiculous.
During an adventure into the criminal underworld, Han Solo meets his future co-pilot Chewbacca and encounters Lando Calrissian years before joining the rebellion.
Oh boy. So
it's like a weird shoe-in to get Lando Calrissian into that.
Yeah.
It's like a very vague description, but then very specifically, and he encounters Lando Calrissian. Yeah, he encounters a lot of people. There's a lot of characters in this movie.
So, Solo, a Star Wars story, is directed by Ron Howard, Phil Lord, Christopher Miller. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, did they give them credit?
No. It's just Ron Howard. I mean, I'll talk about Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, but Ron Howard started as a child actor who played Andy Griffith's son, Opie Taylor, in the Andy Griffith Show for 8 years. Then he went on to play Richie Cunningham in Happy Days for 7 years. He was also in The Music Man and American Graffiti. Ron Howard has also directed Cocoon, Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, The Da Vinci Code, and Frost Nixon, all of which were nominated for Academy Awards, except for The Da Vinci Code.
It's kind of interesting that he was in American Graffiti, which is a George Lucas movie, and now he's directing a former George Lucas property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is. I didn't even think about that. It was just a notable movie, so I put it in there. But yeah, the film stars Alden Ehrenreich as Solo alongside Woody Harrelson, Emilia Clarke, Donald Glover, Thandie Newton, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Jonas Suotamo. I'm so sorry if I butcher that. Jonas Suotamo and Paul Bettany. George Lucas began development on the film in 2012. He commissioned Lawrence Kasdan to write the screenplay, which was completed by his son Jonathan after Kasdan was hired to write Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Principal photography began in January 2017 at Pinewood Studios under the direction of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. The pair left the project in June 2017 after reportedly being fired over creative differences with Lucasfilm. And obviously Ron Howard took over the directing duties with an estimated budget of at least $250 million. It is one of the most expensive films ever made. I think it's the most expensive Star Wars film ever made.
Really?
Yes.
Was that big?
And it's because of the reshoots.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, they did have to reshoot most of it.
Yeah, Ron Howard supposedly reshot 70% of this film. So there's very little of whatever Phil Lord and Christopher Miller had. I was just listening to some other podcast today, and I think they finished principal photography with these two.
And then this. Yeah. I mean, it was like less than a year ago that Ron Howard was brought on board.
Yes.
I think like he had very little time to do the reshoots, and it's almost just kind of impressive that the thing came out.
It is
to begin with. It's also just kind of weird that they wouldn't just push it back until the December release date instead of the May release date if they were reshooting everything.
But yeah, the Variety released a really nice feature this week, which had probably like the most in-depth behind the scenes of the film that I've seen put together so far. I just pulled one quote from it. It said, Lord and Miller would not agree to interview, but a source close to the production says that their ideas were constantly overruled. And this is quoted by this anonymous person who worked on the film. It says, in their minds, Phil and Chris were hired to make a movie that was unexpected and would take a risk, not something that would just service fans, says the source. They wanted it to be fresh, new, emotional, surprising, and unique. These guys looked at Han as a maverick, so they wanted to make a movie about a maverick. But at every turn when they wanted to take a risk, it was met with no. So that's just interesting. Especially, I mean, we were talking about this on our live episode that we just did, but Lord and Miller are now like the third and fourth directors that have been fired from a Star Wars movie while Disney's been at the helm. So it's kind of like I don't know. It's a little weird.
Who's the Well, Colin Trevorrow, are you counting
So these
Gareth
two,
Edwards?
Josh Trank, who was gonna do he was gonna do one of them. The Boba Fett one. I think he was already taken out of that. He was gonna do something maybe. I don't know.
Colin Trevorrow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess you could sort of count Gareth Edwards because didn't they bring someone in for the reshoots, right? Who was the...
Yes, yeah.
So like a half.
Maybe,
so 4.5.
Oh, yeah. Maybe Josh Trank... No, I don't know. Whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. It's really... And I think this is like a part of the complaint I had about like The Last Jedi, where it was kind of like... It was kind of like, what the fuck's going on over there? Like, where it's kind of like, after like seeing some of the inside baseball, where it was kind of just like, we handed it off to like Rian Johnson, and we have no idea like what the third movie is going to be. Just like kind of make it up as you go, and then we'll kind of write a third movie around that. Like, that just sounds fucking insane. Mm-hmm. Insane people fucking run this like.
I guess the difference being that, like, when they're making, like, like Rogue One or Boba Fett, which is presumably going to take place before the new trilogy going out, I would assume, because it's probably a Boba Fett prequel story, right? So, and then Solo obviously being a prequel to the other ones, like, they don't have complete free reign because everything they do has to line up with where the story ultimately ends in canon, whereas like The Last Jedi kind of has free reign because they're determining where things go after that. But it is kind of weird, because like you have this story of like Phil Lord and Christopher Miller wanting to do all these things, being completely shut down to the point that the project fails and they have to leave and someone else is brought in. But then you have Rian Johnson, who is basically just like, who met for lunch with J.J. Abrams. J.J. is like, here's where I think the movie is supposed to go, but you can do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. They let Rian Johnson do whatever he wants, and then he's just going to hand it off to someone else, and they're going to do whatever they want. And like, there's no one really being like, well, it has to be this, or there's no one being like, this is the overall plan for everything. Like, JJ could say like, oh, this is where I thought the characters were supposed to be, but Rian Johnson was allowed to do whatever he wanted with Last Jedi. And
it's unfair to say, but I'm probably gonna say it at some point during this movie, that I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller obviously had a better idea. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not really fair to Ron Howard because he kind of has to pick up somebody else's mess and do that. It's a clusterfuck or whatever. But I mean, Phil Lord and Chris Miller kind of have this like Han Solo. Like, prequel is just like this bad idea from the get-go, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Just make kind of an original story. But then again, as soon as like Phil Lord and Chris Miller were signed onto this movie, I was kind of like, oh, I like them. Like, they have this history of making bad ideas, like 21 Jump Street or the Lego Movie. Like, who the fuck knew the Lego Movie would be like a good movie, kind of?
Or that 21 Jump Street would be like one of the top comedies of the past like decade.
Right, yeah. Or, speaking of Eric, you can talk whenever you want. Clone High. They made Clone High.
Right, I mean,
it's a classic. It's a comedy classic.
Another series that Eric gave to Joe in his entire
makeover.
I think the thing to put into consideration with those things though is like what the risk there is taken.
Yes.
And I think with Star Wars, it's like such an important franchise for people who have been following Star Wars since the 70s, that there's a lot of like, it's like a heritage. And I think that Disney doesn't produce bad movies. It doesn't make bad movies.
Right, yeah.
And like, they have interests to make sure they're making money, and there's continuity there.
Right.
And I think I read something too, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys seem like really like research about this, but didn't like Disney sign on a bunch of people from like the Game of Thrones writers to like go write more movies after? Like, they
gave them a whole trilogy. They gave Rian Johnson another trilogy, I think separate from the Skywalker story. I forget what the Game of Thrones trilogy was supposed to be.
So like, think about like in the context of that, right? It's like, think about like what we're really dealing with here is like, they just call the shots, you know? It's like, you do what we want you to do or get out, you know? So as far as the directors, like, if any of these directors think that they're going to come here and do, like, really incredible, like, groundbreaking career creative work, that's not what this is anymore, guys.
You know what you get into bed with.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
But that's the thing that's so weird about it is that, like, we have all this documented history of Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, being, like, controlling everything to the point of firing directors after principal photography's been finished on a movie. But then with Last Jedi, she must have trusted something about Rian Johnson's vision for the movie so much that she was just kind of like, yeah, like on the Directors Guild of America podcast, Rian Johnson talked about Last Jedi, and he was like, yeah, like she didn't really, like, no one really told me anything about what to do. Like, I submitted the script, and there were some, like, light touches up here and there for, you know, some technical stuff, but, like, basically the movie was how I wanted to make the movie without any real, you know, interference from the studio.
Maybe
that's so strange to me from everything else I hear about Kathleen Kennedy and this movie included. Like,
maybe they're very protective of these anthology series that have to directly do with the original trilogy, and they're trying to, like, protect those people from, like, the 70s from not being like, that's not the Han Solo I know, he's not funny. Yes, he is, you dipshit.
Well, I think there's a chance they take, too. Like, I think there's, like, some type of calculated risk. In the sense
most
that,
definitely,
like,
yeah.
When you think of, like, superhero movies, right? Like, you know, I follow DC comics, I follow Marvel comics, I follow Star Wars. Like, I'm pretty, like, you know, I grew up with this stuff. I'm a suburban kid. I grew up in New Jersey. Like, you know, that stuff is really, like, important to me. And DC hasn't been able to take off the ground yet, you know? Like, the, you know, Chris Nolan series with the Batman was great, you know? The Dark Knight series was good stuff, but, like, they have not been able to launch off yet.
Right.
So, like, those are the risks that you take as a studio or, like, a, you know, production company to create these like, this art, right? It's like, like, if you do it wrong, it takes a very long time to get better, you know?
Oh,
like,
most definitely.
There are some superhero movies that will never ever see the light of day. They can't get a launching point, you know? Fantastic Four being a great example.
Yes.
That has been tried multiple times. Superman has been tried multiple times, and it's very hard to get off the ground. So these are the risks that, like, you know, these studios take to, like, make this work. So that's to your point about the anthologies. Like, yeah, if I was Disney, I'd be really protective of it. So if I have a vision of how I want to make money and have, like, look back on this and be like, you know, Star Wars started as this very edgy, taking lots of chances in the 70s, a sci-fi movie that hadn't been done in big screen, like, theaters before.
Right.
To make it like a 36 film empire.
Yes.
That's a very big risk.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
At this point, I feel like it's like kind of the scales have switched over. That there's less of that. Like, I mean, there's money to be made, right?
this is, I think this is like the first movie where maybe the risk hasn't paid off, though. I just think it's interesting that it's also the one that they seem to be meddling with the most.
Interesting, yeah.
Because I mean, this had a very disappointing first weekend at the box office. I want to say it was like one something. I don't think it didn't come close to 200 really in the first weekend.
They're concerned about making their money back, which is crazy to think about.
And
like
then
a Star Wars movie.
It had a 66% drop off in the second weekend. It came with like 28 million the second weekend. Like, that's a crazy drop off for Star Wars. Usually Star Wars movies are like weeks and weeks of just like filling the theaters, and you know,
and this is our
I go see Star Wars movies usually like 2 or 3 times, and I'm sure there's people who see them 4 or 5 times, you know.
Right, and this is our first, like I was just talking about on the live episode, this is kind of our first Star Wars movie that's not during December, you know, since they've started this whole thing back up again as their first summer release. Obviously, there's something going on there, kind of. I think they thought they were going to get those 3-day weekend barbecue dads to kind of come in and be like, I know Chewie, you know, like,
we did at one point think that it was also just lowering the expectations. Like, December is the Star Wars movie release date. Now, if they move it to May, it's kind of being like, it's not going to be what The Last Jedi was, or even what Rogue One or Force Awakens was, and it's not going to be what Episode 9 is going to be. So
it's kind of
view it in a different lens.
It's kind of a tragic coincidence too that the movie is called Solo, because like I feel like where like the movie press has been going at is like Solo expectations, Solo movie turnout. Like really did not play. We
already recorded the intro for this, and that's literally our intro joke.
Yeah, Mike goes like, wait, like how low are the box office numbers, Joe? And I go, they're so low, Mike.
So yeah, there's no such thing as being original anymore.
No, there isn't.
But actually, to your point earlier, Mike, about what you were saying about like the fact that there was so much meddling in compared to like how big a risk there is to be taken. I'm really conflicted as a really pretty devout Star Wars fan about how to feel about this movie. And this is something I had to take away as I was watching it is that I read a bunch of reviews about how this is just kind of like a simple like spaghetti western style movie in space. And I think about it more as like this is also part of story writing, right? Like if every chapter of a book you read was the best chapter of the book, it would be very saturated. Right. So they have to have these like kind of filler movies. And like as long as like a couple really good parts happen and they tie it into something else, like we'll look back on Solo and be like, yeah, it was important for these like crucial scenes that built into something else, probably.
Kind of, but
I think the Marvel movies the same way.
Right, but the Marvel movies are bringing these again. They're all working into like this fucking universe or whatever, but it's this catch-22 where there's kind of like you can't preserve your artistic integrity if you're kind of marketing towards people like Han Solo, remember that guy? Like he's a fan favorite, and then put his name like real big up on like a poster kind of, as opposed to what if we just made this, Western heist movie in the Star Wars universe, but it was just a bunch of names we didn't know, kind of,
That's
and
why
it was
kind of like, we'll get into, because I'm curious about, I don't think we've really talked about how you feel about the new generation of Star Wars coming out. So I'd love to hear, and I think the fans would like to hear where you're coming from before we get into Solo about that. Sure. But I think when you compare this to like Rogue One, we kind of talked about this on the live episode where like, there's a lot of things that don't work in Rogue One, and I'm a defender of Rogue One. I think there's a lot that does work in it. And I think what at least works comparatively to Solo in Rogue One is that it's all new characters, besides a few that they throw in there and shoehorn in there unnecessarily. But the main characters are new characters that we're being introduced to that like the studio's not worried about like ruining for anyone, or and we're all not worried about like them not living up to our expectations from other movies. Whereas like Solo, from the gate, it being a Solo movie, it's a disappointment to me already, because why do we have to go touch that? And then it gets to be a disappointment in is Alden Ehrenreich, however you pronounce his name, going to be able to live up to Harrison Ford? Is he going to be able to do an impression or a performance that actually captures what Han Solo was, for us growing up with Star Wars? And is it going to, change how we view the future movies of Star Wars based on how he handles that Han Solo? There's just so many ways that it can already be a letdown just by doing the movie, and then in the performance and the actual execution of the movie. Whereas like Rogue One, I feel like it has more free reign to just be like there's not really a lot of stakes in making a movie about the Bothan spies that got the plans to destroy the Death Star. Whereas like how did Han Solo grow up, or how did Han Solo become Han Solo? There's a few more stakes inherent in that. And
because I think this movie, like just to get us onto the track or whatever, the way this movie, I don't know. I hear so many people who are like, I was really on board for the first 10 minutes. That was exciting. And then the rest of the movie kind of goes downhill. I was like...
For Solo, they said that?
Yes. And then, I know. And
I'm like the reverse.
The beginning of this movie is rough. It's kind of like... open on child slavery planet. Han Solo is boosting a car. It's just so stupid. And it was like, Han Solo is actually young Oliver Twist. And he's also like, it's just like, it's goofy. It's
before we get into it, Eric, Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Last Jedi, how did you feel about each three? Very quickly.
I think they're great.
All three?
Yeah, I really, really like Last Jedi. I Force Awakens a lot. What was the other one you asked?
Rogue One.
Rogue One, incredible.
Yeah.
I think these movies, they're all really, really great. And I think it's like important, for me at least, this is how I feel about it, as a Star Wars fan, is that you can't, in my opinion, it's very, very hard to find anything that's very redeemable about Clone Wars. Attack of the Clones, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And even like episode 1 is one I think has some really great points, but honestly, I haven't watched episode 1 without the redacted Jar Jar Binks scenes. Like I haven't actually watched the real movie in probably 10 years. I watch it on YouTube for the redacted Jar Jar Binks scenes. So like for me, like when I put into context of like the whole like Star Wars universe and all the movies that exist, they hit their rock bottom a long time ago, guys.
They only have to. A lot of people will view it that you only have to be better than 3 movies, and that's the original
and like
3.
and like all these expectations that all these like prequel films have to like meet to like some type of expectation. Like I just feel like Lucasfilms failed already. They failed to do that. Like episode 1 through 3 are like pretty mediocre movies, you know. And like I think episode 3 especially like and also like when we were talking before about like the chance these studios take on those films. If there's one time in history you weren't supposed to mess up the prequels, come on, opening up the entire Star Wars universe on those episodes 1 through 3. Those are chances that you shouldn't be messing up on, you know. And like granted, like that's not what the focus of this podcast is about, but like nonetheless, for me, like that sets my expectations of these movies. So I go into when I see these films, I think about those things. I think about like it's really hard to get worse than that. So actually, I'm always really excited to see like what characters they bring into these new movies. So like in Rogue One, they brought in I forget, what was the droid's name? K2. Like that was really quirky, cool character. This one had what was it? L3. L something. Yeah,
like it was L3.
Yeah, it's L3.
And like these characters are like they're getting better at that. They're getting better at like bringing in like the like
that's one of my favorite things about Solo is that I think almost all of the new characters. I'm a little iffy on L3, but I don't hate her. But I think like most of the new characters in this are great and almost better than the characters that they shoehorn in here.
Yeah.
And like, anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way, just because I feel like there's so many different viewpoints, and like I know people who hate every one of the new ones. Like I can think of someone who hates Force Awakens. I can think of someone who hates Rogue One. I can think of someone who hates Last Jedi. So like, we know a lot of people who hate Last Jedi. But then there's people. I can think people who love each one of those movies individually. Like for me, Force Awakens is my favorite of the new ones by far.
Same.
I think it's like my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time. I think it's fantastic. I put Rogue One pretty high up there, but I know people who think Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie ever, and then I know people who think Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie ever.
It's a really good cascade of different kinds of film that way. People were looking for something comfortable. I think the Force Awakens is that comfortable movie. It like replicates a lot of the same like thematic issues as New Hope.
It's a great just like setup of a new trilogy. I think that's why I was so disappointed by Last Jedi, is that like it set us up for this new trilogy, and then the Last Jedi tries to be so different. And it's like, well, we could have been a little different, but like we didn't have to be like that different from the other ones. And I didn't like how much he strayed from what I thought JJ's vision and idea for the trilogy was. See,
I think initially when I first saw Last Jedi, I was like, I feel really weird about that, especially the scene. Like that makes you feel all kinds of different ways, I think. And I think that like across like the boards, like as far as like forums and stuff, that's like everyone was like just like discredit the movie after that. Like it's just insane. But nonetheless, it's like I watch it again and I watch it again. I've probably seen the movie like 5 or 6 times now. I actually think it's probably one of the best Star Wars movies.
No, I know a lot of people that would agree with you.
I think it's because what it did was it finally took kind of a chance in a good way.
And that's what a lot of people like about it, is that it's very different from a lot of other Star Wars movies, and it took a lot of risks in that movie.
And
not all of them paid off, and I think some people are okay with some of them missing because some of them paid off in a big way for them.
Exactly. And this is also a movie franchise that has taken lots of gambles, guys. And like some have failed and some have really failed. Like the Ewoks, I kind of think they failed a little bit.
Oh no, yeah,
Jar Jar Binks, huge fail. The Gungans, big fail. So like I think like in relation to those
Ewoks,
things, though. That's how I feel about it. But I'm just saying, like,
but that's Star Wars. You'll find someone who like there's probably one person out there who loves Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah,
just one.
No, definitely,
no way.
But to get back on track for this movie, but also to rewind and respond to something Eric said, to set a predecessor of like what's going to how I feel about this movie, is I kind of never want to rewatch this movie in particular again. I kind of rather rewatch any of the prequels. And that's just like what it is, because this movie is exhausting. This movie was not fun for me, and I think I'm going to describe like how and why that happens
in detail
over the course of that. So I definitely want to get into that.
All right. So let's actually get into Solo and just our usual warning of at some point we'll have a spoiler warning.
Right.
We'll try to talk more vaguely and about at least the beginning half of the movie, and then we'll get into some spoilers, because there are some pretty big spoilers at the end of this movie, as in all Star Wars movies. But yeah, let's start at like the beginning, which I was so curious or so confused by you saying that people liked the first 10 minutes and then it was downhill from there, because I feel like the first like 20 minutes of this movie is like awful.
It's not great.
Like it's just on like a big picture. Like if you're gonna sell me on like Solo being a movie, and we're gonna see how Han Solo became Han Solo,
right?
Then like the Han Solo we know is like a scoundrel. It's a scruffy looking nerf herder. So it shouldn't start with him being that way. It shouldn't start with him being a criminal, even if it's like forced criminality in like this like criminal orphanage thing that he's in. Like it should start with him being like a genuinely good person, and like maybe he's like really really poor and he's on the streets, and maybe, you know, he's doing some stuff out of necessity, but it's not like a career criminal type thing, you know, or maybe he's, you know, just doing some like vaguely sort of bad things just to get by. You know, he's, you know, telling some white lies here and there and whatnot, and then we see how he actually gets brought into the criminal underworld of the universe. Why would you start the movie on him being a criminal? Because it's just automatically, that's like one checklist of like, well, there's no progression there. He starts off as a criminal and then he ends the movie as a criminal.
No, exactly. And there's a little insight to why that happens, and it's fucking lame, and it's corporate, and it's fucking how they're running Star Wars now. But yeah, it's this is the movie. There is no arc for Han Solo, really. There's a tiny arc. There's like a little like, he has to learn like a small tiny thing, but like when you have a, like, for example, you know, like I honestly haven't watched like much of it yet, but the, you know, there's Breaking Bad, and then there's
Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul. And Saul starts off as this incredibly optimistic person, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, and then he gets turned into, or he's gradually, from what I understand, is being turned into the cynic that we meet in Breaking Bad. Han Solo.
Or same thing with
it was just kind of like
Walter in Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
is
this movie is like the equivalent of starting like making a series, Better Call Saul, and having him just be the same exact character that he is in Breaking Bad.
Or having Breaking Bad start with Walter White being
right, yeah, at the height of his like
being Heisenberg.
Yeah, it's just, he's like, it's just confusing. I was like, what is the purpose of?
And it's a weird setting too. Like just visually, the whole concept is that they're in this criminal orphanage run by Lady Proxima, who is like a light resistant like centipede thing aquatic centipede that lives in the water. So like everything is dark with just like the only tone really being like blue. So like it starts out like dark and weird looking. I really don't like the aesthetic in the beginning of this movie. I've heard a lot of people criticize just the overall aesthetic of this movie, and I think it actually looks great after we get out of this like orphanage, or even after we get off of like the planet that they're on, Corellia, to start out.
The first half of this movie is not great cinematography wise. Did you watch
muddy.
the Red Letter Media kind of, where they play all the scenes with like, you for the first half of this movie, you can't really tell who you're looking at. Like everyone is just silhouettes and everything's very very dark. Like I'm glad that other people have commented on that, because I thought I was in like a bad theater.
Outside of the orphanage scenes, I don't agree with that. I think the rest of it looks great, and I think they're going for.
What about the trench warfare? Kind of, I couldn't really tell what was happening there.
They're going for like war. I mean, I don't like the concept of that scene.
I'm not saying that they do it a lot. It's something that's up their sleeve, and I think they apply it to a lot of different like tropes that they're going for. But like, there's a lot of darkness in this movie, and it's just kind of weird.
I think like. And a lot of the other parts of the movie, they're almost going for like a retro look. Like the movie looks like something that would have come out in the 70s in terms of the color palette a lot of the times.
Right.
And
I think
the contrast.
I think there's a couple of things to put in consideration. You know, I felt the same way as both of you, like watching it like this first time. But then there's some stuff that makes me think about it too. And it's also like, it's a 2-hour movie. They got put a lot of stuff into it, right? So they got to like set the pace, right? I mean, like that one thing you were saying before is like things just didn't like get off on the right foot. Meets Chewbacca in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, 20 minutes of the movie, like that's also like a relationship that like as a Star Wars fan, I would love to see how that develops. But the thing is like to set the pace for this film, to horseshoe all these characters in and like also have like a story to tell. Like they have to set the tone that way,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still some I don't think the orphanage as a concept is necessary. And like I think this is kind of stealing from Red Letter Media. In their review, they had some very good points about like the relationship between Han and Kira is kind of underdeveloped in the chemistry there. Mm-hmm. So like an easy fix is like forget the orphanage. He doesn't need to be a criminal to start out, and then just show us like them being poor and in like a lot of debt, so much debt that they need to resort to crime to basically get out of debt, and then just have like Han and Kira like in their apartment like dreaming about like we get like them immediately on the run. Like the movie starts off, he's already stole the coaxium. He's meeting with Kira. We have like real clunky dialogue where she's like, Han, we can sell this coaxium for 500 credits, the exact amount we need to get like this shit. It's really clunky dialogue in the beginning, and I feel like it has to be a product of the reshoots. I give this movie a lot of like leeway for stuff like that because I feel like there's stuff that was clearly just thrown into the script. Like there's even like another like clunky part where like someone's like, Lady Proxima is gonna have your hide, like in the background, like clearly just some ADR that's thrown in there to be like, we don't have time to explain Lady Proxima. Someone just like set up her character a little bit with this little like throwaway line. But you just like show a scene of like Han and Kira, help us understand their chemistry, their love for each other a little bit. It would help us like further get into the mindset of like, oh, we need to get out of here. And they're kind of just these star-crossed lovers who have these big dreams for just having money and being able to exist somewhere and like the freedom of being on another planet. And I feel like that would be so much more effective than starting off in this orphanage.
It is. It's also weird considering like he's probably 20 something, and it's like, what are you doing in an orphanage, you loser?
Well, I think the idea is that they get kids as kids, and then they're stuck in like servitude to Proxima.
Still like the uncoolest thing, like for Han Solo. He's like,
he is walking past like 9 and 10-year-old kids talking. Like for a while, I thought he was like just doing crime that like had to do with the orphanage, and he was, but he's like the oldest kid
orphan.
Yeah, I guess the $250 million budget didn't have enough for like child actors to do that scene. Yeah, so they just kept the actors who they had.
Right. Yeah. So,
but when it does kind of get into it, like minus like the orphanage, once they're outside of the orphanage, I think the movie is kind of cruising a little bit, and I think it's all right. Like I think there's just scenes and moments that I like in this movie, even if there's a little bit of like boring and bland stuff in between. Like I really like Han and Kira cruising around in the land speeder. Like there's just something very like 70s and like American almost about that. Like it feels like it could be a scene in like American Graffiti. Like it feels like car oriented and like, oh, like maybe we just need a car, we can get out of this town. Like it's corny, but I think it kind of works, and it starts getting me invested in the action and the characters in this movie.
And there's something about these action scenes, that one in particular, where I don't know. Like sometimes I don't know where people are in these action scenes, and the pacing, or there's just something so slow about it all. I don't know. And that one particularly, and then we'll get into other ones. What were we going to say?
I was going to say, I think it's because it's been done before. There were a lot of reoccurring scenes throughout this whole film that, like, if you think about the other Star Wars films, and for me, actually, like, a bunch of the Harry Potter movies and a lot of the Marvel movies, there's, like, redone scenes, you know?
I think I know what Harry Potter thing you're talking about,
like,
too.
And it's not like that it's, like, necessarily a bad thing, but, like, you know, it's hard to be original these days. And like kind of circling back to what you were saying too, like and you as well, is like the development of Han Solo, like what our expectations were for this film. For me, like I kind of like was like, it's gonna be a fun film. That's what it's gonna be.
Right.
And honestly, I walked away saying like, it still was a pretty fun film.
Right.
And I think the to your point, both your points, like what this is, it's Han Solo is Han Solo, and this whole film, without any spoilers, is just testing his character as Han Solo. Every challenge is just him reinforcing that he's Han Solo.
Han Solo as a bad criminal becoming Han Solo as a good criminal or a smooth criminal.
But every like trial and tribulation he comes through, it's just reinforcing his same character.
Yeah.
So it's not like necessarily like how he became; it's him proving. The whole movie is about him proving himself.
I wanna get back to that, but it's spoiler heavy kind of, and it has a lot to do with the fucking arc of this film. Anyway, this whole thing, they have this whole plan to get off the child slave planet with like the Calaxium or whatever that they're able to bribe kind of the TSA with. Anyway, she gets left behind he's able to go. I'll talk more about that later.
That's when I sort of start caring about this movie. Is like it's too fast at first, and then it sort of settles in, and then like we start to get emotional stakes right away. And I thought that's where the movie sort of picked up a little bit. Is like when she gets left behind, and then the movie kind of has an arc that it's setting up expectations already, where it's like, all right, so now the story is he's trying to get enough money to come back here and save her, and it's going to be like a rescue movie, and it's sort of setting up those expectations. And I thought that kind of worked pretty nicely for me. Like,
yes, it's working nicely for me at this moment, but we see her 10 minutes later, and it's kind of a letdown, in my opinion. But first, I have to talk about the fucking worst scene in this movie. And Han Solo's trying to hide from the people who are after him, and decides to kind of go the route of the
joining the Empire.
Right, joining the Empire,
Which,
like Flight Academy.
There's like two awful beats right after one another. There's one where he sees like the recruiting video, and the music that's playing in the background is like the Imperial theme. And it's just a little too meta for me, and that like just new music or no music at all. Like you know, like every other music that we've heard in the Star Wars universe has been like the weird, funky like Cantina band, or like they have the one band in this. Or there's a few bands in the other movies that just play like weird like music that is not at all pleasing to us at all, really. So it's weird to have like the John Williams score behind, in this like TV like hologram thing that's playing.
It's fucking bizarre. And then it's, I mean, again, I'll talk about this all throughout this movie, and I've said this a million times, but like this movie is so dead set on like, how did Han Solo get his blaster? The origin story. How did he get his shoes? The origin story. How did he get his vest? The origin story. Where did his belt come from? The origin story. And then like literally to top it all off, the origin of Han's last name, which is arguably the worst moment in this movie, and maybe one of the worst moments in a franchise that's full of terrible moments, kind of. Like, his last name is Solo because he's solo, kind of. Like, fuck you. His name is...
It's like it's unnecessary. Like no one asked, like why Luke Skywalker's last name was Skywalker.
Oh, it's because he walks on the sky because he has the Force.
Like instead, we get this like it's like almost like a bastardization of like Ellis Island like naming like systems and whatnot, which is like really weird. It's unnecessary and it's not clever. Like it wasn't like they came up with some like new meaning of Solo. It was just,
but
like, he didn't call him Han alone. He's like, oh, you're alone. You're Solo.
Oh, no. But it's also like Han Solo is consistent with the Star Wars universe names, you know? It's kind of like, oh, it's like Han Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, da-da-da-da-da. You know, it's like there are all these names, and all of a sudden it's just kind of like, no.
There's a meaning.
Yes, yeah, it's fucking weird.
It's also, it doesn't make sense because like in that scene he's like, you know, who are your people? And he's like, I don't have any. And I don't know if that's, I guess that's supposed to be in that scene because he doesn't want to like fully reveal who he is, I guess, because he's trying to get away. But he does have a father at one point because he talks to Lando about it. So like he does have people.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't.
His father had a trade too. His father built Corellian cruisers. Right, so like he had a people, you know, and Solo could have had a meaning that had to do with like ships or something like that. It didn't have to be as stupid as like alone.
I hate the breakdown of like all these tiny things though. Like even like clothing shit where it was just kind of like look at yourself right now and all the like affectations that like make up you, kind of like, how did you get them? It's probably not an interesting story. Like it just, you know, I know they're in space and I know this is fiction, but like try to relate with me on a human level, kind of. And like this film does not do this at all. Where I honestly thought a lot of the original trilogy and a lot of what they're doing now, it's all very human, and that's kind of like what I like about this, is like we can see ourselves in these characters. Also, they're just answering fucking questions that nobody asked, and even worse, they're kind of answers in search of questions. Like, it's just weird. It's just dumb screenwriting, and I'm sad that Lawrence Kasdan wrote this, kind of. And like this was also supposedly like his passion project, which makes me sad.
Wasn't he working on this?
You wrote Empire, you dummy. What is this doing like as your passion project? I don't know.
Well, I imagine a bunch of it was changed for the
Oh,
Phil Lord,
most definitely.
Christopher Miller version, and then for the reshoots that Ron Howard's doing as well. And
Yeah.
it's probably another case of too many cooks in the kitchen and too many hands on a script. That when most of the other Star Wars movies have been, Lawrence writes the script, or someone else writes the script, or Ryan writes the script, and there's not like a whole lot of hands besides Kathleen Kennedy telling you what you can and can't do, coming in and messing with things.
But then we jump in time to 3 years later, where Han is fighting like trench warfare because he was kicked out.
This took a step back for me. I
'cause-
liked
'cause
them
he was-
getting away.
Because he was like kicked out of the flight academy for insubordination. I only know that because like through context clues in Wikipedia, like descriptions. It sounds like such
they say it a few times.
Oh, do they? I mean, no, through context, but it's very easy to forget. It sounds like such an important detail. Like maybe like he even says it in the trailer. He's like, I got kicked out of flight academy for having like a mind of my own, kind of. I'm like, yeah, let's see what that looks like. Nope.
No, they do show what it looks like. It's him talking to the one commander who's.
But that's not Flight Academy.
They're fighting back, and he's like, what does he say? He says something that's like basically it boils down to like, wait, we're the bad guys. Yeah. And like obviously his commander's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it was just way too on the nose. I didn't really have any desire to see like gritty like foot soldier warfare from the Empire or trench warfare.
It was so like I don't like that shit in Star Wars. Like it's kind of like World War I, World War II, like trench warfare. It kind of doesn't make sense. Kind of like having a fucking train in Star Wars. Like you guys have spaceships that can move at light speed. Why are we doing a train heist?
I love that set piece though.
It's super cool, but like. So why?
It's through like a treacherous with the spaghetti western like thing. Like it's a train, robbery.
Right, but like
it
Logan
also felt like
kind
it was
of
right out of Captain America.
Oh yeah,
and that was like right out of that movie. I felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I agree.
Something to put into context as well. I think is the expectations of all these movies in the sense that like, and I brought it up earlier about the Marvel films, is that like. There are a lot of movies there that at an individual level are not good movies. Right. But they tie into something, right? And when you're looking at 20 movies, like they all play an important role. Right. Like to meet the person, if the person exists, that thinks Iron Man 2, like age, 3. No, Iron Man 2. That's the one
really? You don't like 2?
Like to find someone that's like that was the most important movie out of all 20 movies.
Oh,
right. Yeah. Or Iron Man 3. You're right. Iron Man 3 is a good example too. Even like the Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, like those weren't. It wasn't a great movie, but it's a really important movie after you see everything else happen. And that's the thing that I think. That's what I always hold out for with all these films. Like when I saw the second Thor movie, I was like, this is not awesome. But nonetheless, like now looking back on it 20 films later, it's like I get why I was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but at least in the Marvel universe, those movies are pushing the plot forward, and it keeps building towards something where that's like this is the thing I'm starting like only 2 movies in I'm starting to get tired of, is that we're going back and like there's a whole bit in like Patton Oswalt's stand-up, I forget what album it's from, where he talks about the prequels to Star Wars, and he's like, George Lucas, like, we don't want to see where the things we love came from, we just want to see the things we love. And like he does this whole bit about like, I don't care how Darth Vader became Darth Vader, I just like Darth Vader. And he's like, I don't want to see, like, I like Angelina Jolie, but I don't care about Jon Voight's balls. Like, is like the punchline of that. And like that's how I kind of feel like we're doing with this, where like I think Rogue One, it worked because it wasn't like, how did these characters become these characters? It was just showing us a cool story that happened to take place in the Star Wars universe, and it did end up being important for the whole story of Star Wars, I thought. But this, I feel like, is taking a step backwards in terms of, it's still a fun movie, I still had a good time with it, but it feels so unnecessary. Like, there's nothing about this that really helps me understand Han Solo on a deeper level.
Oh, yeah.
I'll put it as
like the questions and answers are so unnecessary. Like,
I don't think there's anything in this movie that helps me further understand or enhance my experience of the original trilogy, I guess.
I'll say that the only thing I'm like kind of holding out on is like maybe some type of development with Chewbacca or Lando, and like what their presence in the third movie in the trilogy will look like.
Yeah.
Right? Will it be? Is this like kind of like a foreshadowing? Who knows?
Right.
So like I think that's something to be said, and I think that
it's a possibility, but it's And I mean, that's
like my one holdout, right?
Right. No, yeah.
Otherwise, everything like has been spot.
But otherwise, it's kind of why contract a universe when you could expand it, kind of. And that's kind of what these anthology films like Rogue One and this movie kind of feel like
the upcoming Boba Fett,
doing.
And the rumored Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, and...
right? Because it's kind of like Red Letter Media. I like laughed out loud when they were like, like this movie didn't have the like "you're gonna die" guy. Like I forgot, there's actually a guy in Rogue One who says like "you're gonna die" and points to them.
You'll be dead.
Yeah, you'll be dead. Yeah, you'll be dead. You're gonna die. It's the same fucking thing, but it's kind of like
I'll be careful. You're gonna die.
But it's kind of like, what did we think was going to happen to all these characters? This isn't even a spoiler at this point. What did we think was going to happen to all the characters that aren't Han, Chewie, and Lando?
Yeah.
Like it's like a movie that you already know that it's. Watching these anthology films kind of feels like a movie that you've already watched, but you kind of like forget details of. Like, why would you spend the most money in Star Wars history ever making a movie about that?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of crazy.
No, yeah,
to me.
I agree,
like,
because I'm like watching Lost for the second time now, and like I don't remember exactly how everything goes, but I know who lives and dies.
Right,
So
yes,
like, the stakes are just automatically lower every episode. Anytime someone's in peril, I'm like, well, I know that they're in the finale, so they're going to be all right.
Like, at no point during this movie you're like, uh-oh, our protagonist is in trouble. No, he's not. We've already seen his future. Like,
we've already seen where he died.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. Let's talk about Han speaking Wookiee.
Oh,
Next.
No, I'm going to defend it. I like it.
Why?
He doesn't
the whole.
Because I think in a movie that's filled with like answers to unnecessary questions, him meeting Chewie is the one question that is necessary, and it is answered. And I do like the way it's answered. I think it's kind of like a like sci-fi platonic like meet cute between these two characters. Like it's this awkward meeting that happens between the two of them, and it makes sense in the scene. Like he needs to explain to Chewie without the guards being able to hear how they're going to get out of this. And it's like
or why not strangle him to death.
Yeah, and he's also endearing himself to Chewie. And then it further explains for us further on down the road, like, how they're able to be so close, how, we now know that Han can understand Chewie because he speaks a little bit of Wookiee, like can actually produce it. I don't know, it's goofy. It's definitely goofy, but I forgive it. And I think it makes for a fun scene that, like, even if it's like goofy because we're seeing Han Solo do something that we haven't seen him do before, it's not like it's a characteristic that ruins Han Solo. It only endears him to us more because he's got this closer relationship to Chewie. Now we understand it more. Like, I wish there was more stuff like this in this movie that was like, oh, that's an answer to a question that I actually had that helps me understand a relationship a little bit more that affects the other movies.
The scene where they're doing one of the heists and Han passes like the blaster to Chewie to go protect the other Wookiees, that did it for me.
Did it? Or
that answered the question to me. That was like
that
a
was
quick,
kind of nice. I like that.
Like 60-minute scene, 60-second scene. That was just like, this is why Chewie trusts Han. Is like Han like wanted to like let Chewie go do his thing and like protect the other Wookiees. That for me was like more rewarding than Han like muttering Wookiee like while eating mud. And like getting
like he's doing
Chewie.
like a little kid's kind of like interpretation of like what a Chewbacca impersonation is, but is that not also real? Like, I mean, like, it's not like we have
right? No, definitely Wookiee vocal cords, so like he would just be doing the best he could.
Right, but that's not even my problem with this scene. Is that I think this is yet another kind of pandering scene. Where it's kind of like in the original trilogy, like they refer to like Chewie as having like a life debt to Han, and I was kind of expecting a little more, like from that scene, like the origin, again. Once again, it's like the origin of the life debt is that like Han points out a pole that Chewie can like, remove, and he's kind of doing the heavy lifting.
There's in spoiler territory we can discuss. Okay, there is stuff.
But still, it was weird scene just because it's like Chewie's been down here killing multiple people and he can pilot a plane, but he can't figure out that if he removes the pole, like he can escape. Kind of like it was just
that
like
part
weird.
In particular is a little weird. Yeah,
it was. it was, I don't know. The whole scene was just kind of like...
It was one of those things where, like, when it was happening, I knew it was going to be a problem, and I heard people in my theater laugh, but like it was like they were laughing at the movie and not with it.
Never mind.
when the Wookiee, no, they were laughing like, oh no, like he's doing like the. Again, there's only like 5 people in my theater when I saw this, so I could hear the reactions of everyone. I don't know. I liked it. It was. I thought it was cute in a way that was endearing and answered some questions. And it's definitely corny. It's corny as fuck, but like it's corny with like a purpose. I think, you know. Whereas like him getting the name Solo does nothing.
You know, it's even worse when he's like, "Hey, what's your name, by the way?" He's like, "Chewbacca."
That's bad. That was
Chewbacca.
Bad.
I'm never going to remember that. That's 3 syllables. How about Chewie? And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to anybody who disagrees with this, but I'm sorry, people. That's not only fucking illogical, but that's also, once again, not how humans function. This is not how nicknames come about. Like, you're not like, 3 syllables. Let me shorten that to 2 syllables. Like, it's just...
And it's unnecessary. Yeah, no one was... Like, we got the fact that Chewie was just a slightly shortened nickname for Chewbacca. Like,
right, yeah, exactly.
It's like he's like trying to like explain what a nickname is in that.
Sure.
Like, you could have had that scene, like, it could have just been like Chewbacca, and he had just be like, I'll call you Chewie. Mm-hmm. That's fixed. That's fine. That's all we need. And that's even too much there. But, like, they're just like trying to explain things that no one's asking about.
I do feel like we're getting into spoiler territory because we're about to do like the train heist or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you haven't seen Solo, maybe join the few people who have. We didn't even talk about that. I don't know anybody who's seen Solo besides...
Yeah, I don't know.
Us.
A single other person.
It was funny. We're at like a barbecue like a few days after it came out, and like everyone at the barbecue was like, "Oh, have you seen Solo?" No. Oh, neither
and they're
have
all
I.
people who I know have gone like opening night for most of the other Star Wars movies.
It was like just a lame turnout. There's like a bunch of people that I work with who are like gung-ho Star Wars fans. Like I have people all over my Facebook and social medias that love Star Wars. Nobody wanted to go see this movie.
Does anybody need another beer?
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Ooh, I can use one.
But yeah.
Joe, talk by yourself for a little bit.
Well, I've been we have this whole train. I mean, now that we're in spoiler territory, we have this whole train scene. And my biggest complaint about this is that Woody Harrelson loses his wife, and then we just kind of gloss over that. Like he's just kind of like he turns around and punches Han in the face, and he's like, "You know what? Let's go do this." You know, like it was just kind of like, I don't know. I guess we're at a loss for time, and like that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean. Are we fully in spoilers now?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I would think that him not being upset about Val dying has to do with his character's like trust nobody. Where like I think there's even a line somewhere where Han says something about Val dying, and he kind of glosses over it in a way that's kind of like I think it's when he's talking about initially like trust no one, where like Han's like, yeah, like well, I mean, you trusted Val. And he says something to the effect of like basically no I didn't, like, you know, he was probably just using her in a way, and that's sort of the way to be a criminal in his eyes, is to literally trust no one and use everyone and assume that everyone's out to betray you. So I don't I think Val probably appreciated him. I don't think he appreciated her nearly as much. And
I can go with it, but there was more emotion as she announced that she was going to do it, where he was kind of like, "Are you crazy? Why would you fucking do that? Like, let's just." Not do this mission, you know.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I think as a movie, they're trying to set us up for the expectation that he's a good guy who cares about her and they have a loving relationship, and he's not someone who actually abides by his idea of trust nobody.
It's just strange to have it both ways, you know. Like you can kind of see where I'm coming from, but it's also I can also see where you're coming from. But
I don't know, I really like the train heist scene.
Oh no, I like it too.
I think this is where like the action is really ramping up. This is
the best set piece of the movie. I think.
And we're getting cool settings, which is like what Star Wars has always been very good at. And I feel like they hadn't really done that thus far in the movie. Like the Empire trench war was not a cool setting. Corellia was kind of cool looking, but not in a Star Wars way. It wasn't like a place that you were like, oh man, this just looks beautiful and cool and unique. It was just different. So like to be on wherever, I guess, are they on Hoth? or
I don't know.
I don't know if they're on Hoth, but they have the droids that are on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back are here, which they call Vipers, and I think they were Sentinels in Empire. That was just a weird difference.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually actually called them anything in Empire. I think just the action figure was Sentinel droid. But I like the group that they're with. I feel like the thing that kind of stinks about this movie is that the characters that really kind of in this movie matter the least to me stay alive, and all the other ones just keep dying in this movie. Like, I really like the group of like Rio, Val, and Beckett with Solo and Chewie there. Like, I think there's a lot of good chemistry there. I was really hesitant about Jon Favreau's part in this movie going in, but I think he actually does a really good job with Rio, and I was also hesitant about like another character that's completely just 3D and an alien, because I hated so much Lupita Nyong'o's character. Who is that? And Maz Kanata, and I hated that character. It didn't look realistic to me. It was bad animation, but I feel like they made Rio look pretty realistic in terms of just like giving him like whiskers and stuff. Like, they went a long way with the detail in this, and it looked good. And Jon Favreau, I thought, gave a great performance as Rio, and he was kind of like just like this cute little alien with a different personality that we haven't really seen in Star Wars before. And then he just fucking dies like right away, and you're like, all right, well, move on to the next new character.
That also felt weird. It felt like a fast forward of something. I don't know. It was just this movie tonally is kind of all over the place too. Like, I wanted to appreciate when he was dying, and he says like a little sentiment about dying, and I was kind of like, that's kind of out of nowhere. Like, I love this character, but I don't know.
They're definitely, I can see, and I don't know if it's Ron Howard or if it's the original script, but there's like a theme they're trying to get across, and I think that's maybe their whole reasoning for like the I don't have a people line is like dumb as that was, because then when Rio dies, he gives like the line where he's like Val was right, like, you know, you should have someone, you shouldn't be alone. He says it in a better way than that, and I think he's trying to get, the whole movie is basically trying to get across this idea of like it almost being like this friendship between Han and Chewie, because that's basically where the movie ends up, is just Han and Chewie being there. We also have to get into explaining the ending to Eric at some point. Eric has missed the last 15 minutes of this movie, so he doesn't know where it ends up.
Right.
We'll get there. We're working through it.
Right. Yeah, so we have this. Everyone but Han and Chewie survive, guys.
Despite the trailer where we thought Chewie was going to die.
But, and Woody Harrelson's character, Beckett, as well. So, and yeah, I won't get too much into it, because, I mean, again, if you're listening, you've probably seen this movie, kind of, and if not, we'll still catch you up and everything. But so they go back to kind of this person that they promised who was in charge of this job, he's kind of like this, I don't know, mob boss, criminal boss kind of.
Dryden Voss, he's played by Paul Bettany, who I think is actually really great in this role. Again, like, I think all the new characters they introduce in this movie are pretty effective. Like, there's none of them, besides maybe L3 for a little bit, that really make me cringe at the concept of them, you know? You know
what's crazy? This movie had so many reshoots that they were basically able to just recast roles. And what's it called? In the Lord and Miller version, Michael K. Williams, or Omar of The Wire, played Dryden Voss.
They shot his scenes?
They finished.
I knew that he was like supposed to be hit.
They did the whole thing.
Because then I know Paul Bettany basically asked, I guess it was Ron Howard, was just like, is there any room for me in Solo? And he was like, yeah, actually there's a spot right here.
I think they just reshot so much they recasted him. So he just got completely kind of steamrolled.
And supposedly Michael K. Williams had a very different idea for how Dryden Voss was going to be.
Yeah.
And Paul Bettany like totally changed that. Or maybe Ron Howard changed it and Paul Bettany just adopted his vision.
Right. I think there was even people were talking about, there was supposed to be like a smaller element of CG, kind of. And I don't know. I would have liked to see what that was. But, I
like Paul Bettany, though. I think he does a really good job. Because like, I feel like we've had a lot of different types of Star Wars villains before. You know, some have been robots, some have been like demons. This was kind of nice to have one that was just like a dude who was like a greedy rich gangster, but like a human rich gangster.
He's kind of just like, he was like businessman with scars on his face, kind of. Like, he was like...
He's got a lot of personality, too. Like, he's got, a very specific way of, like, handling things. And it's, like, this kind of smooth talking, but, you can't, like, trust anything that he's saying. And he's, like, everything that he's saying has kind of got, like, two meanings behind it. And he's not exactly nice. He's kind of like that asshole type of nice where, he's being polite, but, he's being an asshole, too. I don't know. I like it. I think it works pretty well. He's a good addition, even if only for a short amount of time.
Right.
But yeah, basically, they didn't get the coaxium, and Dryden says he's about to, I think, kill Tobias Beckett, or basically, give me a reason why I shouldn't kill you. And Tobias is like, oh, well, we can go and we'll get the coaxium somewhere else. And they sort of hatch this plan.
But we do also have this thing, and again, like I said before, it's 10 minutes later.
It's a little bit longer, but yeah.
We're already kind of regrouping with Kira. And Han and Kira's reunion on the like space yacht or whatever, I thought was kind of like weird. I feel like we began where we were introduced to them as these kind of like soulmate, like sweethearts who have their entire like lives planned out. At least they're kind of like, we need this much money to get out of here, and then we're gonna get a ship and we're gonna fly it, because that's anyway. But their love runs deep, so deep that they both kind of make these selfless decisions very early in the movie. Whether it's Han kind of going on the other side of that wall at the airport-esque place, and he says. And she's like, just go, get out of here. Fucking leave me and you go and get out of here. Or the fact that he's kind of taken on this like crazy lifestyle. I mean, it's not like a stretch, but he's risking his life to go back for her, essentially. Yeah. He'll do anything to go back there and get her, kind of. And then they meet back up on this yacht, and it's kind of like, oh, hey. And I was just kind of like, what? It was a little weird for me, and there's never anything, there's like this obvious, I feel like there's something where they wanted to play up this kind of like whole thing between, what's his name? Like Dryden and Kira, where there's obviously something like sexual or whatever, like, she's my new girlfriend, kind of, like, she's not your girlfriend anymore, kind of. And Han Solo has some reactions, but they're not big reactions, and they're not. It's just all strange, and it's
handled kind of poorly.
Exactly, yeah. I guess that's. What
I think a better version of this is like, you establish the relationship between Han and Kira a little bit better. Mm-hmm. If like you're letting me have my entire way, like Rian Johnson style with this movie, like we completely cut out the Empire trench scenes, or have it be much shorter, because like I think the problem is that like. He keeps saying and expressing this idea of like, I'll do whatever it takes to like get back there. And like my whole purpose is to get back to Corellia so that I can rescue her and get her out of the orphanage. But we do like an immediate, like, he joins the Empire, and then we jump forward 3 years. And then it's really just like he's been in the Empire the entire time. So we haven't been able to see him like doing anything he can to get back to Corellia to find her. Mm-hmm. And then like he, obviously is able to get out of the Empire. And then things are kind of moving fast from there. And it's really just like, it's just been like a day or two, like since he got out of the Empire. And we've only really seen like a day or two of actions of trying to get back to Corellia. Mm-hmm. So like a more effective version would maybe be like, 1 or 2 or 3 different places that, how is Han trying to get back to Corellia? Because it just kind of seems like empty words from him. Like, oh, I have to get back to Corellia. I have to get back to Kira. But like, for her, it was just kind of like, oh, I got off and, I did whatever. And it's that would be much more effective if it seemed like Han was really trying that 3 years. And
yeah,
I know that like realistically, like you probably couldn't have done much while you're in the Empire, but again, don't have him join the Empire. Like, put him in a situation where we can show how much he's trying to get back to Corellia and get back to Kira. That would further like establish their relationship too. Like we'd be like, oh man, Han really loves Kira. Everything he's doing is about trying to get back to Corellia to get back to Kira. Mm-hmm. And then when he runs into her and she's got a new boyfriend who's like this criminal like overlord, and like she's back in the life that he's trying to get her out of, like that would hit much harder. We'd be like, oh damn, like, he's been trying his ass off these past 3 years to get back to Corellia, and she doesn't really care. Like she already kind of got out of it and never came to try and find Han.
this just like a prime, like if you're gonna write like something like where somebody has like wit like Han Solo does, and there's a new guy in the love of your life, you know, like, and he just kind of stays silent the entire time. Like,
they do it like because later when they meet Lando later, who we haven't really talked a lot about.
They do it with that.
They do it with Lando, and they do it in a great way. Like it's one of the few times where I feel like he's really emulating, or at least the writers are emulating the way that Harrison.
Racist.
Well, just the way that the way that Harrison Ford used to be, because like there were scenes with Lando and Princess Leia in the original trilogy where like Lando would be putting the moves on her and being all like flirtatious, and Hando would just be sitting there kind of like, what the fuck am I, like chopped liver? Like, and he'd be kind of like throwing, you know, stones at Lando's, you know, whole flirtation method. And like, he kind of does that. Han does that in this movie with Lando. It's a different girl.
Oh, please tell me more about this guy.
Yeah.
It's weird. They just like pay too much attention to these, like the past trilogy tropes. And they're just kind of like, I don't know, just put him in the new movie. And it's like, kind of like, no, that's not how Han would act. Like, you know, it's weird. But yeah, so then they go to, you know, Lando Calrissian to get his ship or whatever, and probably the most fucking boring... I'm sorry, I keep trashing all these scenes. There's literally nothing interesting about this game, this poker game, or this game of Sabacc. Or whatever, to me. Like, I'm not totally sure how Han wins. Is he... Like, he's kind of just naturally good at the game without ever playing? Kind of?
I mean, I guess I don't think it's handled that well, but I think the implication is supposed to be that he's just a natural charmer, which would make you good at a poker type game.
Okay.
A card game. Because you can read other people and you can...
But we don't
not allow
see
them
that
to read you
through the game.
They don't do a great job of showing it. No,
it's just kind of like pushing chips.
And Han has also been like kind of awkward thus far in the movie. He hasn't really fully developed into like smooth Han yet.
I don't know. There's just, it doesn't seem like there's anything that Han has at the table that nobody else really has, or something that would allow him to just be the sure thing to win, kind of. And
how do you guys feel about Donald Glover as Lando in this movie?
I think he did a great job.
Yeah,
I thought between like the way he acted, the voice, the way the gestures, like the ego, I think I was great.
I think he's like too close to impression for me. Like I think like looking between like Alden Ehrenreich, butchering that name, get a better last name, and
I think you're saying it right.
Am I really Ehrenreich? I think so. And Donald Glover as Lando. I think like Lando, or Donald rather, goes too far into impression, where he's just doing a Billy D. Williams impression, and it's a good impression, but it's just an impression, and we're not really getting like his spin on the character, and it also doesn't come across as like a younger Lando. Whereas I think Alden does a good job of being separate from Harrison Ford and being a younger Han Solo, but then at times he doesn't do enough to help us think of Harrison Ford or the Han Solo from the trilogy. Like I think like there's in some of it I think is the writing, but I think like in like the original trilogy, like Han is very quick to anger. He gets frustrated all the time, and it's a source of comedy for a lot of the things, because he's usually yelling at Chewie or like at C-3PO, and C-3PO will say something snarky and he has like a snarky comeback, whereas like this version of Han is kind of like too happy for me and too positive all the time, and like times that he would get like mad, he wouldn't really get like boomingly mad. It would just be kind of like quiet. Whereas like I think of so many times where like even if you didn't want to do a complete Han or Harrison Ford impression, you could like, you know, when you're angry, he does a very specific way of getting angry, where he has this like big booming voice where he's like, I know, and like it's a very specific way that like he gets angry and yells. And this Han doesn't really yell at all, and he doesn't yell nearly like that in this movie. And I don't know, I'm torn between these two characters, because like Donald Glover is too much impression. He has a few moments where he's more focused on the acting, and he's more focused on the human element of it, and I think that's where he works the best. And I think Alden doesn't have enough of like the Harrison Ford Han in there, and it's harder to connect the two characters there. So I feel like they're two extremes of
I agree
how you handle doing a younger version of an older character.
And we like Alden all right. He's a 2017 Handy nominee for his performance.
Prestigious Handy Awards,
Yes, for a performance in because he's fantastic in Coen Brothers' Hail Caesar. He's just a fantastic actor. He's not as bad as I thought he would be in this movie, but like he kind of dodges the impossible task of playing like young Harrison Ford. Like, how do you really do that? I feel like Harrison Ford has come back in like The Force Awakens, and even he doesn't completely understand how to play like Han Solo again.
Oh, I thought he was good as...
Oh, no, I love him, but or something like, if you see him in interviews or something, like, he doesn't quite still, like, know how to... It like, the point is, like, Harrison Ford has a problem playing Harrison Ford. You know, like, that's how, like, complicated, like, young Harrison Ford is. Like, he's, like, a really great... I don't know. But, I agree. Whereas Donald Glover, as much as I love him, and I love that he's in this movie and a part of this cast... I felt like he was doing this like a Billy D. Williams impression, which was like it was super weird to watch like the SNL skit of him playing Lando and then watching this, because it feels like an extension of that skit, kind of like he was still just kind of like, oh well, I'm doing this.
I almost thought he was like better in the SNL skit.
Oh no, yeah.
It feels like it might have almost been like. You know, I mean, when the movie goes through extensive reshoots, you've got a lot of time to work on the character. And, like, I feel like in the card scene, he's very clearly doing his Billy D impression.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, hey, sweet thing. And, like, it's just, like, it's the way he, like, modulates his voice in that. But then, like, moments where it's a more human element and he's just focused on the acting, like, we're in spoiler territory now, but when, like, L3 dies, like, I think that's some really good acting from Donald Glover there. And it has nothing to do with, like, oh, what would Billy D. Williams sound like in this scenario?
Exactly. It's like, we all know Donald Glover's practically good at everything he does. He's fantastic in Atlanta. I mean, it's just like, he does everything. And he's great at everything. So I don't feel bad saying that he's not, like, the best at this. I don't know. There's definitely, like, a tonal problem where somebody's not controlling everybody on set, where, like, Alden Ehrenreit's like, well, I'm going to do, like, my own interpretation of what young, like, I almost said young Sheldon. Young Sheldon, young Han Solo, young Boba Fett.
I got a bad bazinga about this.
But he's doing his own thing, and then, like, Donald Glover is kind of doing, like, a 1970s, like, period piece, like Billy D. Williams with, like, Colt 45 kind of, like, impression, kind of, where he's like, it works every time. Like, it's kind of like, yeah, you can talk like that in a commercial, and maybe for the very small part that he was in Lando, but, like, I don't think that's all that there is to a human, kind of, I think there's a more three-dimensional performance there.
Well, that's where, like, the whole impression part comes in, because, like, people will do impressions of, like, a certain way that an actor sounds, but, like, Billy D. Williams, even though Donald Glover is doing a good Billy D. Williams impression, there is more range to Billy D. Williams in the Star Wars, like, trilogy. Like, Lando has more range to his voice than just, like, hey, like, right. Lando. Like, he gets angry, and he gets, his pitch modulates sometimes, and it's not just like a one note performance, and that's kind of what Donald Glover's performance feels like at times in this. But I don't know, there are parts that I do like. I think Donald Glover has enough charisma that I'm not really that mad about it.
No.
Like, I still just like seeing Donald Glover on screen, and there are times where he does bring a little bit of just that Donald Glover humor into the character that kind of work.
I was just going to respond to, like, your thing about, like, the Donald Glover or Lando losing his robot. I just thought that was a weird tonal shift where, like, there was more emotion in that than, like, Woody Harrelson losing, like, his wife. Like, it was just strange.
I think they had more time to establish the relationship between L3 and Han. And I think
it more screen time with
Lando,
them, too.
It also hurts more when, like, comedic characters die, I feel like. Yeah. So, like, L3 gave us a lot of laughs before she dies. And then, I don't know. I like that scene. Just because I feel like we haven't seen a whole lot of, like, robots, like, really dying in Star Wars, and it was kind of interesting just to see that from that perspective, and it was interesting to see a human reacting to it that way. It was just kind of new and fresh, and I kind of like the idea of... I heard or read a lot of articles being like, the darkest thing that happens in Solo is L3 being put into the Millennium Falcon, and... like they were viewing it from like a Black Mirror perspective, and they're saying that it was really dark because like she was all against like servitude and she was trying to free all the robots, and then she basically, without her permission, gets put into like eternal servitude.
A little funny.
But I think the idea is more that like, you know, she was very also loyal to Lando,
right?
And at least for I think the darker part is that Han gets the Millennium Falcon and doesn't take out L3 because then she's just stuck with Han forever. But it kind of brings a whole new perspective to like when Lando gets the Millennium Falcon back in Return of the Jedi for a little bit. It is Return of the Jedi, right? Mm-hmm. When he gets it back for a little bit, like he's it's more than just like, oh, I'm getting my fresh car back from like earlier in life. Like, you know, he's kind of like seeing an old friend again. And I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool, and it was like a very small thing they could have done to just, you know, explain some other things going on.
It's also kind of like L3 dying's kind of like, oh, like funny, sassy droid that dies tragically during a mission. Like, where have we seen this before? Like when K2SO dies.
I am getting a little annoyed with Star
film,
Wars droids in terms of like, I feel like they have to have a droid in every Star Wars movie, and they have to like they're trying to come up with like a vastly different personality for all of them, and they're not always successful. Like I liked K2, but he was very similar to some of the other droids we've had, and like BB-8 is basically just like a younger, more nimble R2-D2. And...
I mean, they provide comedic relief, you know?
Yeah.
That's their point, I think.
It is just kind of like, it's like a trope at this point of what's the Star Wars droid going to be?
Yeah.
I think like circling back to the points we were making earlier too, is just like, I think it's about the expectations of these films.
Yeah.
And like I think it's pretty clear, like it's hard to hold this one on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's like it is played out, it is redundant, but to me, there's like something kind of like nice about that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Like a
I said,
comfortable place.
Yeah, like it's like when you walk into like these movies and you're thinking like gonna be the best one ever, the next best one ever. It's nice when you see something that's like not that great. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that's also part of like selling a product. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like we probably could have had the iPhone 8 like 10 years ago, but they have to make 7 of them, so we keep on buying them.
Right, yeah.
Come on, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, that's how I feel about these movies, is like they have to keep us on the hook. So like to put this on a pedestal and be like,
well,
that's in my opinion.
I mean, the iPhone's got progressively better, though. You know? Like, it's kind of like, well, you need this next one, kind of, where it's kind of like, I don't think anybody thinks they need this next one, and I think like the box office numbers have been like...
reflective of that.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. But no, I also get like it's a comfortable place to go. But again, I don't know. Like, I think you want to make movies when you spend $250 million. Again,
well, I don't think Solo is what they wanted it to be. I think at a certain point it turned into, we're too deeply invested now. People know it's coming out. We just have to salvage what's there. And I do, looking it through that lens, I think they did all right. Like, I think in terms of, this could have been so much worse. I had expectations for it to be so much worse. And it's still not great. But like, I don't know, I wasn't really bored watching this.
Yeah.
I wasn't as entertained nearly as I wanted to be. But I've seen a lot worse movies. And like, I think this is one of the worst Star Wars movies I've ever seen. You know, below it is probably only like the 2 and 3. I think Phantom Menace is still pretty cool, so I put Phantom Menace pretty high.
Pod racing was fun.
Oh, I love Phantom Menace. I love
Now this is pod racing.
Yeah, but Attack of the Clones, that was a rough one.
Yeah,
that's the worst. That's the worst.
That is definitely the worst.
I think another thing to talk about is like, I think this movie really makes me realize that Star Wars really needs lightsabers. I think
it's hard. It's hard. No Jedis.
I think Star Wars really is the story of Jedis, and like, I mean, a lot of people view Star Wars as just the story of the Skywalkers. I think you can make a Star Wars movie that doesn't have the Skywalkers if it's at least around the Force and Jedis. That's what makes Star Wars Star Wars. That's what makes it not just a sci-fi movie. It's the spiritual like journey that these people are going on, and it always adds this like element of emotion to the fights that are taking place, because it's not only good versus evil, it's like two different viewpoints on the same force. You know, they're still fighting with the same ideas, and just lightsabers just as a physical element are so cool. And like, in every Star Wars movie, even the ones that I haven't liked, there's that moment when like the two people bring out the lightsabers and you know they're gonna fight. That just, it feels cool. That's what feels cool and comfortable about Star Wars to me. And that's what, it's a trope that'll never get tired to me, is like two people throwing out their lightsabers, and there's just that little pause of like, all right, now we're going to be in the lightsaber fight of Star Wars. And to have a movie that didn't really have that in this, it felt a little boring. I know they didn't have it in Rogue One, but they did have the Force in Rogue One. Sure. And I thought that made it feel closer to Star Wars. And I know they want to do some different things, but just for me personally, the climax of this movie was a little hurt by not having anything about the Force or, Jedis or lightsabers or anything. They did bring back stuff that had to do with the rebellion and like the sparking of the rebellion, and that was kind of cool, but ultimately it had a pretty lackluster climax, I thought.
Yeah, I think
action-wise,
I think the movie took entirely too much time to talk about the Kessel Run. That was like 30 minutes of this movie.
Red Letter Media had some really good points. Do you watch Red Letter Media?
I don't.
They have some really good reviews.
I just think the Kessel Run, man.
They were talking about how the Kessel Run is this thing that's been talked about in Star Wars. Like, I made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, it's not like when he says that, it's like he's saying like the Kessel Run is this very specific course, and I made it faster because my ship was faster. But in this, it's like saying like, I ran like whatever marathon because I took a shortcut around. Like, it's not that the Millennium Falcon is faster, which it still is, but this does not prove it. But
it changed the pace of this whole movie
going into the.
I thought so. I mean, yeah, it's cool you ran the Kessel, run in 12 parsecs, but the movie took like 40 minutes to explain it.
Yeah.
I
got excited when they said that something was on Kessel, because I thought that it sounds kind of stupid now, but it would have excited me to have an actual racing scene with the Millennium Falcon, because that is, even if it's not necessary, that is still something that it's part of Star Wars lore. It's what they always talk about with the Millennium Falcon is 12 parsecs is what I made the Kessel Run, and it would have been better than it felt like one of the parts I'm not crazy about in Phantom Menace, which is like the underwater scene. There's always a bigger fish. That's what running away from like the tentacled thing towards the maw felt like.
But that's what this kind of
felt like. They're running towards like a gravity hole, and they didn't even like try to get into any like relativity stuff or that would have been a fresh thing to introduce to Star Wars, like actual space physics. And
this is also
why have a gravity hole if you're not going to get into that?
It's more like lazy pandering.
This is also just the asteroid scene from Empire. They're so lazy that they even just play the same music from that scene.
Yeah.
I was like, you guys fucking doing this, man? Like, make up some new music.
Yeah, and we're being chased. We have to go through this. And
let's get. Come on, let's get to the end.
And this was the worst. I guess set piece, in my opinion. This whole thing was just, and then they Fast and Furious.
It's like an undefined place, and it's like an alien that's like completely CGI. So there's nothing like really grounded about this place that they're in, and it's Kessel, but it's like.
Well, it's kind of like what is the y'all gonna kill me for this one, but what's the in the original trilogy, in the sand that they want to feed
the Sarlacc.
Yeah, it's like the Sarlacc, how we can just kind of see like a piece of the Sarlacc kind of, and like that's haunting, know, and it's kind of like whoa, like, and I'm gonna be eaten by that. But in this, it's kind of like it opens its eyes and we're like, whoa, that's spooky, like kind of, and then it zooms out and shows like the whole thing being sucked into like a hole.
Yeah,
like it's just kind of a little dumb. And it's also weird that, I mean, yeah, Red Letter Media predicted this, but that it's just weird that they made an entire film. I mean, I guess that's what Rogue One was. The most expensive like Star Wars film of all time, just all around just Han claiming that the Millennium Falcon made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, because in that scene specifically in New Hope, like Han Solo is just kind of giving this, empty boast because he's not the guy he claims to be. Like, it's just on such weird merit that they make this into the defining characteristic.
And I guess
of
it does
whole
sort of make sense with his character, because it made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, but didn't really make the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. But I almost thought it would be more effective if he was telling the truth, and like it did make the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. And
right.
The Kessel Run was a specific route that, you have to go, and that's why people couldn't do it that fast.
Sure.
It's just weird.
I just thought it way too long, and it changed the pace of the movie.
It took up a bunch.
Was, yeah.
I did
was
really
a lot.
I did really like the Droid Rebellion. I
Oh,
thought
that
it
was
was
funny. I thought
this movie needed more funny. Like for being like a summer blockbuster, like
Well,
to
and a
not
Han
only be
Solo
like
film.
yeah,
right. It
he's
should
like
be
the-
funny.
he's the funny
He's
character.
the funny character in
and
Star
there's
Wars.
like
yeah.
I mean I chuckled at a few parts, but the droid was the only part where I think Red Letter Media also said they thought it was from the Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I think I have to agree because it has this like goofy humor to it where like the droids are just like beating with their computers, and it's like it is like actually laugh out loud funny in that scene.
Yeah.
And it's just a funny concept because it starts with like her freeing the most like in a like obscure. It's
he just like pushes a button or something, and that's like for him to be liberated is like
and
hilarious.
It just starts this whole chaos, and like it is a moment that actually is funny with L3. She has a lot of funny moments with that, where she's like, I found my life's purpose, and that's all working really well. And I think they needed more of that in this movie. Like,
yeah, it was just like, it's like the idea of like a droid uprising accidentally being the diversion is such a funny idea. I don't know. I thought it could have gotten more out of hand. I thought it could have been like a little funnier, kind of. I don't want to be hypercritical of this scene just because like they kind of just go through the emotions. But yeah, like I said, like liberating the tiny droid who just like presses one button, kind of like
it's a lot of visual gags, and they could have had more actual punchlines. Like that's a great like comedic scenario to live in, and like I don't know, it could have had even more visual gags than it had. Like that were better established punchlines rather than just literally like droid beats up computer. Like it's visually funny to look at, but that's not really like a witty punchline.
I was hoping K2 was gonna be
L3.
like
K2 is Rogue One.
Wait, what? Wait,
L3, I think.
who's K2? Is that
K2,
the one from
K2SO from
okay, from the L3
voiced by the red hair guy. I forget his name.
just fucking
From
The
Knights,
droid, the
from
robot.
Knights-
the droid. But the I don't know. There was definitely like something like a missed beat in there where I was just kind of like she's like, what can I do now? And they're like, well, I feel like somebody almost sarcastically is like, well, liberate like your friends or something.
Right.
I don't know. And then she kind of does it sarcastically, but then it like cuts back to her. And I felt like with the better comedic timing or cutting, I feel like that could have been funnier where she like all of a sudden cuts back to her and she's like, Viva la liberation, like Viva la revolution or something, like, but instead it kind of felt like a little clumsy to me. I don't know. It's kind of like, or for her for her to look around and be like, oh shit, like it's getting like out of hand. Like I kind of was hoping like at the end it was gonna kind of be like like how like that one scene in like Hot Rod starts off as like a musical number and like escalates into a riot, and they just kind of like have to get out of there like for their own safety.
Yeah, if they took a little more time, and like it starts as like this like marching revolution, and then it turns into just destroying everything, and then it's so dangerous they have to leave. Yeah,
it's like I think I almost laughed more at the idea of what it could have been than like what it actually was. It was also a weird subplot for Solo, like robot rights or like droid civil revolution. Kind of like recontextualizes like a lot of other like what are all the other droids we know? Are they under some sort of like
I mean, they do talk about restraining bolts a lot in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Not really in the context of like equal rights.
Yes. But yeah, let's I feel like this has been going on for a really long time. I'm sure viewers don't feel that way at all. But let's speed up to the end so we can explain to Eric how this
So last thing, what was the last thing you saw, Eric, in the movie?
Well, just like let's speed it up from here. So they end up
12
getting
parsecs, they do the Kessel Run.
They get it. They are
Kessel is the place they go to, right? They're on. What is the spice place they're on? I think Kessel is the desert place they end up going to. I think that's why it's the Kessel Run. It's because it's the run to Kessel.
Where they process it or whatever that process is.
Because I think it's the second location they said they were going to.
So then that's the meeting place, and then so yada yada yada. Han Solo's heart grows 12 times bigger that day and decides that he doesn't want to give away because the
marauders that have been chasing them.
Who like it seems like it's going to be a big reveal when they like the one thing that has nothing to do with the Star Wars universe is when the big reveal and it just takes off a helmet. It's like, hi, I'm a little girl. It's
Dude,
kinda
people
like,
in my theater, I thought I was missing something because people in my theater reacted to that the same way that they reacted to something else that we'll get to when we
right, yeah.
a couple minutes later. But they reacted to like her taking the helmet off, and I was like, is that someone from like the animated series that I don't know, or from the Clone Wars or Rebels or something like that, or
I don't think
something
so.
from the extended?
I think it's
I've
just
looked
a girl.
it up. I don't think
it's
it is.
just
Yeah,
a little girl. Yeah.
which is fine. I just wish people didn't react that way in the theater and make me feel like I was missing out on something.
Well, they probably thought they were missing out on something and kind of trying to impress the person that they were with. It was
Oh, I know that person.
It's just like what I was talking about before, where it's kind of like we're alienating potential new viewers of this series by doing fucking stupid, ridiculous callbacks, kind of. But anyway,
But that's also, I mean, like it's that's not necessarily the fault of the movie. That's the fault of the way that people have expectations about the movie. Like
it's with the way that
I'm fine with the movie
work,
having
right.
a helmet reveal that's not like a cameo.
Oh, most definitely.
From a character, because
It's
I
great,
actually I thought that was a cool character. Once she removed the helmet, that made me appreciate Enfys Nest that much more. That made me be like, I almost wouldn't hate if there was a Solo sequel if it didn't have Solo in it and it was just about Crimson Dawn. And,
we'll talk about that. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that, baby.
There's stuff coming.
Anyway, I don't want to hit it beat by beat for you guys, so I'm just going to pick up where Eric left off. Eric, I think, left off at the point where there's like a reverse double crossing at this point.
Yeah.
And what's his name?
Tobias Beckett.
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson.
Beckett takes Chewie hostage with the material or whatever.
Unobtainium.
Yes, Mike, you describe this. You have the jargon down a lot better.
Basically, Beckett takes Chewie at gunpoint with the coaxium, and then there's a fight between Drayden Voss and Han and Kira. Kira is able to kill Drayden Voss, supposedly using some kind of like.
Right.
She's very smooth with her. She's very combat skilled, and I think earlier in the film
we see that in
they call it something. I forget what it was. Some kind of combat style. So she kills Drayden Voss. She reunites with Han, and they're kind of like, we can now finally, get a ship and do whatever we wanted to do. Blah blah blah. And
she says, "I'm gonna clean up here. You go ahead."
She's like, "Chewie needs you right now. Go help Chewie, and I'll,
I'm gonna get
make
diamonds.
arrangements or whatever."
I'm gonna clean up this dead body.
Yeah, she looks at. They do have a visual. It is nicely filmed. In terms of, they look at the diamonds and they're like, that's how we're gonna pay for the ship. I have to go sell these or whatever. And then when Han leaves, she walks right past the diamonds, goes to Drayden Voss's body, takes his ring, puts it into the desk, and basically it's this whole like secret hologram system that shows up. And the character that's on the hologram is Darth Maul. From Eric's favorite Star Wars movie. And
so
the timeline of this is after the prequels. So Darth Maul is dead in the Star Wars universe.
But
I didn't notice it in the hologram. People who have paid more attention to this movie said that he does have like the robotic legs, which I guess is a part of the Clone Wars animated series. He's a big character in that.
But it's so disappointing that Star Wars has kind of stooped to this level of
It feels very Marvel-like.
Yes, it's like, well, you didn't read comic like 3 through 4, so you don't understand that. And I had to read this on fucking Wikipedia or something the other night, where
I'm laughing, but that's a real place. Yeah.
oh no, that's where you go.
Yeah.
That when Darth Maul was falling in 2 pieces, he Force glided himself into an air vent and then crawled into a trash room, which took him to a trash planet, and then he constructed 8 legs that he moves around on now on that
8?
trash planet. What?
Is it 8 legs?
6.
Oh.
I don't know.
I thought anything more than 2 is a surprise to me.
Oh no, yeah, it's 6. So
That's like something that works.
Eric closes his lips.
Well, guys, I'll see you later.
Yeah, guys, it's been fun. And that's something that's included in this movie.
Unnecessarily, because it affects the plot in no real way.
Yeah.
She could have been allegiant to a faceless voice on a hologram system.
What about the Obi-Wan Kenobi prequel now?
Well, that's the thing, is that what people are theorizing is that will be the villain in the Obi-Wan. Sure. Because I guess they're big enemies in the animated series.
And
Obi-Wan's going to have to cut him in half again?
He's going to cut him in quarters.
Yeah.
But he So for the first time, I mean,
There's no half-assing it.
Darth Maul is.
He also has a lightsaber in the hologram.
Darth Maul
scene.
is
and it's red, even though holograms are always blue.
Darth Maul is incredibly vocal in this hologram too. He's talking up a storm, which in the prequels, maybe he's had an eye-opening experience of being cut in half, and now he's like,
I need to speak my mind more.
I gotta fucking talk more. Then again, and she's like, okay, like I'll come join you because I've taken over like Voss's role now, and he's like, okay. And then he pulls out his lightsaber, and it like lights up, and it's maybe
he's like
the most unintentionally like comedic thing that happens during this movie. It's kind of like Skyping with like a crime boss who's like, "You ready to do this job?"
Or I'll shoot you.
Yeah, and then on the other side of Skype, he's like, "Hell yeah!" Just starts shooting his gun, kind of like to prove a weird point. It's very strange.
It's like I really liked Kira betraying Han. I think that was well established in the movie.
If she just shot him or something, this would all be so much more understandable.
Well, I even like the way that she betrayed him because it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna like fuck you over, but I'm not gonna go with you. Mm-hmm. You know, because like she doesn't like kill him. She just flies the ship away and looks at him out the window because she doesn't hate Han, but it's like she's moved on. She's not the person that Han thought he was going back to Corellia to save. And I think that's kind of a nice, well-established theme in this, but it's just so unnecessary. Like I'm even okay with the fact that she is like, because I like that they keep talking about like, you know, she's into some deep shit, like, and you know she says like, you know, I'm not the person you thought I was, like I've gotten into some other stuff. I forget the terminology that they use, but basically what they're hinting is that she's involved with the Sith, and I even think that's fine.
I mean, you have to also put in consideration, like they're kind of stuck, right? Like they have to create these prequels, but they can't create new Jedis. You know, I'm sorry, new Jedi or new Sith like lords.
But I think what feels so like bastardly about this is that it's like a prequel movie that's also creating more prequel sequels.
Of course.
Like this is clearly setting up another movie that Darth Maul is going to be in, and that's what felt so Marvel about it. Is like it felt like a post-credits scene that took place in the movie.
Exactly.
They have to. It's Disney, guys.
I would have been happier if it was a post-credit scene because then I could at least attach it for the movie
it's
somewhat.
Not part of the movie
because it's like this cool action sequence. She kills Drayden Voss. We have this cool like, you know, like decoder ring thing that she's using, and then it just goes to this like dumb cameo. It's not even Ray Park anymore, who was like, as much as Darth Maul is a dumb character or poorly handled, Ray Park is great as Darth Maul in the few lines that he has, and like this guy is like almost too emotive as Darth Maul. Like that was, at least be true to the character that Darth Maul was. That was just kind of like, yes, my master, like completely personalityless.
And it's incredibly confusing to see because all of a sudden my mind kind of started just. At first, I was like, oh, I don't know. It's fucking Darth Maul. This must have happened before episode 1. And
I didn't connect those dots until after.
And then I kind of like start trying to do the mental gymnastics of kind of like, wait, Han Solo wouldn't be 20 during then.
Yeah.
Wait, is it somebody from his species?
It's before Luke was born.
Yeah. And then I'm like, wait, is it somebody from his same species? Why does he have the same lightsaber? What are they kind of trying to tell me? And I honestly just kind of thought I was like, oh, it's just another Darth Maul, like kind of thing. And then I had to go home and read that he built himself out of garbage.
Human too?
What?
Isn't Darth Maul human too? He just like is into body mods.
Oh, I don't know. I thought that was an alien. That's how he looked.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. But
I thought it was like an intimidation thing.
This is the biggest thing that makes me angry, though, that I wasn't able to talk about at the beginning. Obviously, there's this character arc that they could have done where they make him go from optimist to cynic, which is we find him as at the beginning of New Hope as this kind of cynical person, kind of. But when I saw that's what I was thinking the whole movie. I was kind of like, oh, they're really not doing this. But when I saw that like last like scene or whatever, I was like, motherfucker, they're gonna try to spin this motherfucker into a trilogy. Like I just know it. Like she can't just fly off and like that's it. Like that didn't look like a final scene. Like
I think Donald Glover signed on for a bunch of more movies.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel I hope that I'd even be fine with sequels. I just don't think there should be another Han Solo movie.
No, but I think they're going to try to make a Han Solo trilogy, and this is where I'm going to fucking burn down the theater, is like when Han Solo starts running into Darth Maul and then running into Jedi, because in A New Hope, he's like, I've seen some crazy shit around this galaxy, but I've never seen anything that would make me believe that like something like the Force is real. That's hocus pocus, kind of.
Yeah.
And now they're setting up a story for like Han Solo is like, better fight Darth Maul, and like, it's just like, I don't know.
I honestly don't think that's the direction they're gonna go. I think it's Obi-Wan Kenobi is the next play.
Okay.
I think because he is in the animated series, he's like villains with or enemies with Darth Maul. I think Obi-Wan is the next leader or protagonist of the next movie. But I think Kira and Lando will probably make appearances in that. And Darth Maul, obviously.
Obi-Wan fights Darth Maul again.
Yeah. There's just like a bunch of things that like it's again, why make prequels when they're this much of a trouble and you are
because they already set up what Han, because the very last thing is like, oh, we heard about a big job on Tatooine with a big gangster, so it's almost setting us up immediately to he does a job for Jabba, he gets in a lot of debt, and then he's trying to pay back that debt to Jabba until A New Hope starts. So I feel like they've already bridged the gap for Han, and I feel like they might just use the other characters.
I mean, all the branding work is done for them. Like to come up with a new idea and a new like series, that requires like outreach. That requires a promotion.
Right.
The branding for this Star Wars is so strong and so hard that like they can make the worst dog shit movie you've ever seen. But you're still gonna want to know.
But that's the thing is that Solo didn't do well at the box office, and I wonder what that does for them going forward.
It would have done worse if they had like done it like independently of the Star Wars like trilogy.
But Rogue One didn't do badly, and Rogue One was just not
as badly, but it didn't do as well as like Force Awakens.
Well, no, I mean those are obviously going to do better, but Rogue One still, I think at the time, broke some records. For I forget what, it was like a very specific record that it broke.
Even if we don't do a Solo trilogy, this is something that I was also thinking of was that
it was pre-sales that it broke.
The Marauders or whatever, that kind of bothered me just a little too, is because like you have this kind of proto-rebellion that Han is being like incredibly sympathetic to where like he's willing to risk it all for like the rebellion kind of, and that's an arc that he has later down the road. Like I was kind of like a little mad about that.
But it makes sense in that case because the second time around he's like very hesitant.
Okay,
it takes him a while to come back around.
Okay, yeah. So like, if he has a bad experience with this kind of, he's like, I don't know.
I think it would have made more sense in a movie where he starts out as a good guy.
I didn't want rebellion in this. Like, like we were so close to not having rebellion, not having lightsabers, and then in like the last few minutes, it was like, pow, 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 pow. And then the girl looks directly in the camera. She's like, maybe you will help the rebellion one day.
I kind of liked it. I mean, that part specifically was a little corny.
Yeah.
But I think Enfys Nest being in this, I think the fact that she's not like a cameo, or she's not some shout out to it, the fact that they started to create something new, but that was also bringing us towards where the movie is eventually going to, or the series is eventually going to go. I thought that was fine, and I like it made the movie that felt kind of pointless matter a little bit to the Star Wars universe, and that was okay to me.
Right.
Because like that was kind of what I liked about Rogue One, is that like it was these new characters, it was people that we knew were going to die. But it ended up kind of bridging this gap of like, we're bringing us right to like A New Hope. And it was a little fan servicey, but I'm also a fan, so you can service me and it's fine.
I still feel like 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this movie and think that there were important scenes in it for whatever is going to end up happening.
I had a lot of fun in this movie. I still think it's an all right movie. It's got a lot of problems, but a lot of the other Star Wars movies have had a lot of problems too. And I think it's kind of weird how few people went to see this. Like, I feel like there's just a weird perception of this movie that's not totally accurate to what's actually displayed on screen. Like,
are we at the how many fingers phase?
I think we're about ready to get. The only thing that we didn't really cover for you in terms of is Han catches up to Beckett and Chewie, and they have this kind of like standoff where like Beckett's like, man, like I told you like don't trust anyone. Like, I was talking about me, and then he's like in the middle of a speech, and Han just shoots, and it's kind of like Han shot first.
What's the origin of Han shoots first? That's the only one that makes sense in this story. Like that works as kind of something that's kind of like
this is fan servicey. It's a nod to the fans of Han
but
shot
it also
first.
works within the story.
It works
shows
within this movie
yes.
because the whole movie is like don't trust anyone. And I also think it's a really nice scene, like because I
like
love
that.
scenes where like people are fighting, they kill each other, but then they're like Han goes over and holds him as he dies, and that's a very like Western like type idea of like like we're killing each other because we want. I feel like that happens in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at one point.
I think so.
I can't remember the specific scene, but somebody like they're at mortal odds with each other, but they're still trying to be like sort of humans about it after the fact. Like so he kills Beckett for the coaxium so he can give it back to Enfys Nest, but then he also goes over and holds him and is like, Beckett's like, oh man, one day I'm gonna get that, whatever the organ thing that the instrument he's talking about learning to play at one point. It's kind of a nice touching like closeout on that whole thing, and I really liked Woody Harrelson's character in this. Like, I was a little worried going in because I
was worried about this, and he
well, just because I like Woody Harrelson so much, and he feels like a weird choice for Star Wars, and I was worried that it might be a role that I don't like him in. But I think he was actually great in this, and I like his character. I think he's a nice addition to the criminal like underbelly of Star Wars, and I kind of like the path of him showing Han how to be a criminal, and Han being the one that kills him in the end. I thought that was kind of a nice character arc. And then all that really happens after that is he brings the coaxium to Enfys Nest, and they're like, oh, maybe you'll join the rebellion someday. And he's like, yeah, someday, maybe, blah, blah, blah. And then he gets in the Millennium Falcon. No, then he goes to win the Millennium Falcon back from Lando. They have a last card game, and he steals the device that Lando has for inserting cards. Yeah. And he's able to beat Lando fair and square, which is like another callback to a specific line. And then he flies away in the Millennium Falcon, and they go to Tatooine, and the movie ends.
But yeah, let's do final thoughts and some fingers, because I feel like we've been.
It's a long
one.
Our Star Wars ones always are.
Yeah.
You knew what you were in for.
You know what you were in for. Just repeating what Mike says. But
my hype man.
Yeah, you heard what he said. I don't know where I am with fingers on this movie.
I know where I am with fingers.
So I might request somebody to go first.
Yeah, I can go first. I don't know. I was pleasantly surprised in terms of where my expectations were for this movie. I had really low expectations, just knowing what went into the production and the fact that like Ron Howard had such little time to pull this off. And it was also just weird that Ron Howard's doing a Star Wars movie that didn't seem like it was totally going to fit. But then I did really like the second trailer that came out for this movie. Not the Super Bowl one. I thought that one was kind of weak, but the second trailer after that kind of got me hyped for this, and it showed a little bit more. Between those two, I was a little disappointed coming off of that second trailer. I don't think it lived up to the hype from that. But it's not a boring movie. It could have been better. It could have been funnier, I think. I was expecting it to be a funnier movie coming from the Chris Lord or Phil Lord or Chris Lord, Phil Miller. Phil Lord, Christopher Miller.
Sure.
Lord and Miller version of this movie. I expected to be a funnier movie. Han Solo is a very funny character in the other movies, and even in like the new trilogy, he's used as like a source of comedy. And I didn't really get a lot of that. And like I said before, I was hoping for a little bit more action. A little disappointed that, a Star Wars movie without lightsabers is kind of what you would expect it to be. But it was kind of nice to have a different movie. I did like the kind of spaghetti western feel of it, like the train heist and the kind of like showdown at the end between Han and Beckett. And like I really liked like the desert setting of Kessel at the end. We didn't really talk about that, but like how there's like basically everything except like a tumbleweed blowing across in that scene, and like there's like the desolate like bar there that like they're like making drinks at, and I don't know, that's all kind of nice to me. I like a lot of that, and I think a lot of the new characters that are introduced in this are really fun, and I almost wish that they all didn't like die in this movie and could get like another movie to sort of like grow and appreciate them more. That being said, compared to a lot of the other Star Wars movies, it's pretty low on like the overall Star Wars ranking list. I gave Last Jedi a 3. I think Last Jedi is a better movie than this. I think I would give Last Jedi a 3.5 if I ranked it now. So I'm going to give this a 3. Worse than Last Jedi. worse than a lot of other Star Wars movies. Really, it's only better than like Attack of the Clones and maybe Revenge of the Sith.
Are you ready, Joe?
Yeah, I guess I'll settle on something. Yeah, I don't know. I really wanted a Lord and Miller version of this movie, but again, I think Ron Howard, he does all right. I don't know. He's just like a journeyman director. You know, he's done his time, and he comes in, and he's a guy who can finish a movie. It's definitely, even more than a Western, I think it's definitely like this like 50s or 60s heist movie that's kind of transposed onto the Star Wars universe. It's got all the tropes. It's kind of like, we're indebted to this dangerous crime boss, and we've got to do one more big job, and like there's a morally questionable woman from the hero's past that's now working with them. The one thing I have to tip my hat to is that it doesn't feel like a Frankenstein mishmash, or like it doesn't feel like Justice League, where you can see like where what's his name.
If nobody told you this was reshot, I don't think you would know.
Right.
That it was reshot.
Yeah. It feels like a coherent vision, no matter how uninspired I think this movie is. But I do think it's at best when it's kind of just like this heist movie set in Star Wars, and it's at its worst when it's just obnoxiously prequel, kind of. Where I wasn't even that crazy about Rogue One, that made New Hope kind of a better experience. This, I think, cheapened the experience of the original trilogy, kind of. I don't know, like I said, I think there's so many chase scenes in this movie that are supposed to be exciting and fast-paced, but they really just kind of turn out to be slow and pretty poorly shot. A lot of this movie's pretty poorly shot and lit. I also hated that opening title where there's like a holographic, just like Solo, a Star Wars movie, and then the camera zooms through it, like at the very beginning when they were doing kind of like a drone shot of like him like in the speeder or whatever. What the fuck was that? It looked like a Star Wars fan film. It was just weird.
They also didn't have other movies, I think Rogue One didn't have the crawl.
Yeah, it didn't have the crawl.
But this had like in the same font as like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
I think Rogue One had that too, right?
Did they?
I think so, yeah.
Maybe.
It wasn't a big surprise to me. Yeah, I don't know. There were small things that I never got to talk about, which I won't talk about because they're just kind of not totally important, like the fucking singing lady on the yacht. I hated that.
Yep.
I also kind of thought L3 was voiced by a black woman until I looked at the IMDb.
She's the lady from Fleabag.
Yeah, it's the girl from Fleabag, which I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of like
that
weird.
Makes it weird.
It's kind of weird that she's
kind of doing
she's channeling
kind of
like a sassy black woman, and I thought that I was like made me feel a little uncomfortable. But yeah, it's just funny that it's just weird. I didn't need this. This movie didn't need to be made. To quote The Last Jedi, kill the past, which they very obviously don't. Very funny. I mean, again, just to harp on this one last time, but the David Chen, or I think it's at David Chensky on Twitter, said Solo. It says, remember that scene in Josh Trank's Fantastic Four where right at the end the thing looks out into the horizon and says, "It's fantastic," and that's how the crew got its name? Remember how that felt? Solo is just 2 hours and 15 minutes of that continuously. I think if you're going to go see this, for those of you who somehow stuck it out through this and haven't seen the movie yet, I'd like to leave you with something Mike said when I heard somebody ask you or whatever in our group of friends, and they said like, how was it? And you said, it's exactly how you'd think it would be. And I think that's literally what this movie is. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like I finally have a chance to go hard on Star Wars movies. I'm going to give it a 1.5 fingers.
Ooh.
Wow.
Because this is bad. I think I'd rather watch any of the prequels before this. I think the Clone Wars is very rough, and I can't say that it's a better movie than this, but this movie was kind of painful to watch just because of the origin story of dumb details. I don't know. Eric, I'm gonna pass it off to you, pal. How do you feel?
I gotta kind of go with Mike on this one, I think, man.
Go for it.
I think I gotta go with Three Fingers.
Yeah.
I think it has a hard rewatchable rate for me.
Right.
Like I'm not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously wasn't there. I was able to like leave before finishing the movie. But I say that like with this like understanding, I think, and granted, like I don't think every Star Wars fan needs to do this, but there's an appreciation. Like I really love Star Wars. I really love the story. I love the character development. I love what I really actually do like what Disney's done with the franchise.
Yeah.
And for me, like I think the movie's just getting better. Like this was not a great Han Solo prequel movie,
right?
But it was a pretty good movie. Mm-hmm. And like out of the context of like the things that I expected for it, I did not enjoy it.
Right.
If I wasn't like under time constrictions to finish the movie and be here to talk about it, I would have finished it. Mm-hmm. I didn't walk out because I didn't want to see it.
Right.
But yeah, I think that as far as like all the themes we've talked about, I feel like those are all like again like we've talked a lot about today, like issues about like doing reshoots, mm-hmm. issues about continuity, and to like have to fix a movie like this. Like I'm sure there are movies that have horror stories.
Oh,
that
most definitely.
People would never ever watch again.
Yeah. This is in the limelight.
Yeah,
it's Star Wars.
And there are other movies that have only had like one shoot, and they're awful. Mm-hmm. They're so awful.
Right.
So. At the end of the day, I think I align myself with like Mike's critiques that I think that with all the newer Star Wars movies, I think they're being much more intentional about their casting, being much more intentional about like layout, color. I think this they as far as colors like scenes, scripts, I think they're touching on a lot of cool issues, and I'm excited to see how these stories develop, like with the rest of things going on in the world,
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
So I give it a hard 3. And I hope that the next one will be a 4. We'll see how it goes.
So that'll come out to 2.5 fingers. Don't even have to round down. Just comes to a clean 2.5. So really splitting the baby on this one. Just right down the middle.
Yeah.
For the Star Wars movie. But that's the lowest we've given a Star Wars before.
Hey, listen, man. Things aren't what they used to be. Trump's president. Star Wars movies are getting worse. It's all...
I will sort of close on saying, like, when I left The Last Jedi, it was like the first time that I left a Star Wars movie that I saw in theaters, not like when I left like Force Awakens, I immediately like put like the soundtrack on my phone and listened to it the entire way home because I immediately just wanted to be back in that universe. And I had the same kind of feeling leaving Rogue One. And when I left Last Jedi, I kind of left... Like, I still think it's a better movie than I initially thought when I came out of the theater. And I did end up going to see it again, but I wasn't like immediately ready to go back into that universe. Mm-hmm. And then when I left this, I'm still not immediately ready to go see it again. I think I still probably will see it again, but I'm not like dying to go back into it. And that's kind of just like this downward progression since Force Awakens for me.
I feel the same.
But it's upwards from I've literally only seen Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith once each.
Oh, really?
I've never rewatched it.
Oh, man. You're in for a treat.
I've seen Phantom Menace like 20 times.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so this has been a real long episode. So
let's get the hell out of here.
Let's plug some stuff and get... Oh, I didn't read the Rotten Tomatoes. Sorry. Let me just read this real quick. And I didn't read Ross's review, which we need to get to.
What was it?
Hold on. On review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, Solo has an approval rating of 71% based on 334 reviews with an average rating of 6.4 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, a flawed yet fun and fast-paced space adventure, Solo, a Star Wars story, should satisfy newcomers to the saga as well as longtime fans who check their expectations at the theater door. Rotten Tomatoes is always just very spot on, I think, with their synopses.
Yeah.
And Ross Wiseman left us with the great review on Facebook of, I liked it.
Thanks, Ross.
If you agree or disagree, you can leave a comment below on SoundCloud, YouTube, or hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're hearing, listening, watching, or finding out about this episode. Or like Ross, you can head to our Facebook group, How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The Facebook group, that's literally the name of it. And you can leave a comment on when we post about movies that we're reviewing upcoming, and we'll read your reviews on the episodes. Everything else you can find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Let's get some last plugs in for Eric's bands if you want to rattle them off real quickly.
Sure. So yeah, I play in a group, the Funk Cross Brass Band, Rude Mechanical Orchestra, Ordinary Things, Boy Things, and Out of System Transfer.
Nice. All right, so check all 5 of those.
Yeah, sure.
It's an entire night's worth of. It's a playlist.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Eric. This was fun.
Oh yeah, it's great to see you guys.
And check out a review next week of Action Point, aka Jackass 4.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.